Hello, and welcome to this long episode of the Unauthorized History of the Pacific War podcast. My name is Seth Paridon, historian and deputy director of the Mississippi Armed Forces Museum. Usually, and John is not here, obviously, but usually at the end of each season, we'll take some of our longer episodes, like part one, part two, or whatever the case may be, and we combine them into one super episode, if you will. And that's exactly what we're doing here with Pearl Harbor. This is the first raid, Pearl Harbor, the first raid. This is the first two episodes we did on that particular aspect of the Pearl Harbor attack. So please enjoy. Hello, and welcome to episode 517 of the Unauthorized History of the Pacific War podcast. My name is Seth Paridon, historian and deputy director of the Mississippi Armed Forces Museum. And with me, as always, is my co-host, good buddy, John Parshall. How are you this fine July 22nd, John?
I'm hanging in there. As you know, I suffered a computer crash over the weekend and I had to go out and buy myself a new box. And so I'm in the process of hauling down terabytes worth of cloud backups from the old machine and reinstalling all the applications. And I'm deep in the editing for the 1942 thing. And it's just, my hair is on fire and I don't even have any hair. So I'm doing
great.
Clearly
it's on fire because it's not there anymore. It's gone.
Anyway.
It's gone.
So this will be good. A little distraction, a little chat about Pearl Harbor. Let's do this.
Indeed. Yeah, we've been building up to this for crying out loud. I don't know, weeks.
Yeah.
Weeks and weeks and weeks. So here we go. This is going to be the beginning of the attack on Pearl Harbor. So the warships cleaved through the seas at 24 knots, their crews on high alert. The six carriers were in the middle of the formation, surrounded by escorts, the tiny destroyers ringing the formation of Japanese ships like sheepdogs watching for wolves. The battleships Kirishima and Hiei, which had been in the middle of the vanguard during the night to guard against any unforeseen encounters, began slipping to the sides of the flotilla. The carriers began loosening their formation to gain the room for conducting flight operations. At around 0330, the pilots began to stir. In the ready rooms, the pilots anxiously tuned the radio to KGMB, Radio Honolulu. Soft Hawaiian music drifted over the airwaves, an indication that the fleet had not been sighted. Surprise might very well be achieved. Strike Commander Fuchida Mitsuo donned his red underwear, which I think is pretty cool, and we can get to that in a minute.
Right.
Met his compatriot Murata Shigeharu in the wardroom and grinned as the latter polished off a large breakfast. These men, the leaders of the strike, were confident. The plan was reviewed again by the pilots. The men studied the blackboard with the layout of the island's airfields, the harbor, and the American ships in it, went through their various assignments in their heads, and ran for the flight deck. As the first air fleet approached the launching point, the fleet's commander, Vice Admiral Nagumo Chuichi, turned to his air officer, Commander Genda Minoru, and said, quote, "I have brought the task force successfully to the point of attack. From now on, the burden is on your shoulders," unquote. Genda smiled and replied, quote, "Admiral, I am sure the airmen will succeed," unquote. And boy, will they.
Mm-hmm.
At 0550, the carriers turned their bows into the wind as the famous Z flag from the Battle of Tsushima whipped at the halyard. 15 minutes later, Lieutenant Commander Itaya Shigeru screamed down Akagi's flight deck in his A6M, the first man to launch from the flagship. His Zero dipped as Akagi's bow dipped. The watchers on the flight deck gasped. Then Itaya pulled up, gained altitude, and climbed. The attack was on. On Oahu, Sunday, December 7th was like any other day. Peaceful, calm, quiet. The weather was very Oahu-like, 73 degrees and partly cloudy. Admiral Kimmel was up and getting dressed for his regular golf day with General Walter Short. Sailors aboard the ships in port were stirring, many getting dressed and ready for the day's activities, which for most were none. For most, this Sunday was shaping up like any other Sunday in Pearl Harbor, at least for now. For others, something was different, something was odd. Just off the entrance to the harbor, Lieutenant William Outerbridge and the destroyer USS Ward were patrolling lazy laps at the mouth. During the early morning, Outerbridge had received a report of a submarine periscope in an area where no periscope should ever be. An hour later, he received another report, this one a definite sighting of a potential submarine. As Ward pulled in close at 0640, the OOD saw what looked like a conning tower trailing the USS Antares. Outerbridge assessed the situation and called for general quarters. High above the beaches at Opana Point, two young Army privates, Joseph Lockard and George Elliott, were shutting down their mobile radar station, their work complete and their 3-hour shift over. The men were getting ready for chow. As Lockard was about to power down the set at 0702, the scope suddenly showed an enormous radar image. At first, The men thought the site was malfunctioning. It wasn't. Another check revealed the image was indeed accurate, estimated to be 50 plus aircraft coming in from the northeast, range 132 miles, and closing fast. Ba, ba, ba. All right. So, what is the situation in Kitabutai and First Air Fleet even before all this is going on? What's going on this morning?
Well, the first thing that a lot of the people are aware of up on the bridge and soon the pilots when they get up on the deck is that the weather is still really bad. This force had transited through extremely heavy weather coming down, and the night before, when they begin their high speed run, they turn directly south and they kick it up to 24 knots to, leave the oilers behind, fuel up, and then move on down at a very fast clip to get north of Oahu. And the seas are still very heavy this morning. I forget the extent of the winds, but there was a lot of wind, and it was just a nasty time to have to be taking aircraft off, which gives you a sense for just the professionalism in this force that they could even launch under these conditions, let alone carry out this attack. I think that certainly among the pilots, you had the normal pre-combat jitters, and it spanned the gamut, depending on the individual. Some of these men were extremely cool customers. They were very well trained. They knew their business, and I think as Genda and some of the others said, they were confident that they were going to be able to pull this off. Others, I'm quite certain, were nervous as hell and probably
Sure.
hadn't slept all night.
Yeah.
So
Going back to the red underwear thing,
yeah,
that Fujita wore. I mean, it's a real deal. And Murata did it too. Murata had red underwear too, and red drawers, and I
yeah,
think he had a red scarf or a red shirt, if I remember correctly,
yeah. I think
underneath it.
that's
And
right.
and it wasn't for bravado, although kind of sorta. It was according to Fujita that if he got hit, the blood wouldn't be as
Prominent. Yeah,
prominent. Yeah,
yeah,
and it wouldn't, freak out the guys. So,
yeah,
you know, they were expecting to run into some trouble. They didn't think they were
yeah,
going to get off scot-free.
yeah. Exactly. And the expectations for this operation at some points were they thought they might end up losing half the carriers, in the course of carrying this thing off. So everybody understood that this was a really big deal. Obviously, this is no one would have expected to have been in this position a year ago that you are going to attack the Americans' most important fleet base in the Pacific by surprise. And we're bringing the whole shooting match to this thing, all six of our big carriers, basically every plane that we can put on those carriers. And that's another thing that sometimes gets lost. This is absolutely an all hands on deck kind of operation in that they were stripping out some of the more modern aircraft from some of the other smaller carriers in order to beef up the air wings on these six attack carriers. That's one of the reasons that even as far in the future as Battle of Coral Sea, when the carrier Shoho goes into action, she's still rocking some of those older A5M Claude fighters. She doesn't have a full complement of Zeros, in part because Japanese aircraft production was nothing to write home about, even on the eve of a war, and they'd stripped a lot of those fighters out to put them on Kitabutai for this attack. One of the things that you'll see is as we reviewed that in some of the footage leading up to this. There is Japanese footage of them transiting, and you can see them using deck parks on their carriers because they had so many aircraft. The hangars were bursting at the seams with planes so that they could beef up these air groups and make them as big as possible. They normally didn't like transiting with deck parks. They didn't like exposing their aircraft to salt water corrosion and that kind of stuff. But again, the importance of this tack was so high that yeah, these carriers will never have as big air groups as they are rocking for this operation.
And the targets are, obviously we've said this, everybody knows this, but we're going to say it again. The targets for the main attack is going to be, several things around Oahu, but for the Anchorage attack, they're hoping to catch the American carriers in port, and they're hoping to, in a way, kind of catch them in deep water. And to that extent, the Japanese launched two cruiser scout planes,
Yep.
and one of
Yep.
them goes to Pearl, and the other one goes to Lahaina.
Yep.
And
Lahaina,
let's
which is used as an alternate anchorage sometimes
mhm.
by the Pacific Fleet. And so they're snooping out both of these anchorages. They had already gotten a report from the Japanese consulate and the spy who was working in that consulate that it did not look as if there were American carriers in port. So they had that report in hand on December the 6th, Tokyo
Mhm.
time. It's now December 8th, Tokyo time. So there was a general belief that the carriers were not going to be there, but who knows? Maybe one of them came back during the night or something like that. It's not beyond the realm of possibility. And so, yes, they launched these two cruiser planes to get up there and do some scouting reports before the attack comes in to do sort of a last minute verification of what's there.
So let's talk about the launch sequence. Let's the
Yeah.
weather was blech in the
Blech.
morning, but the launch sequence goes pretty damn well.
Pretty well. They do have a number of mechanical aborts. I think there's a total of five out of the initial attack wave. But this is something that the Japanese are really good at by this point in the war is getting airplanes up and getting them formed up. So you've got six carriers in the formation. This is the only time that these six carriers will operate as a single
Mhm.
group. And I don't know the actual end to end of the beginning of the launch to the end of the launch. It's probably on the order of 20 minutes or something like that, is it not?
Which is astounding. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
yeah.
quick. Yeah. I mean, they get them up, and that's the thing that it's so mind-boggling. And that's another conversation for later, is that the Japanese carrier operations, their deck
Deck load
ops,
strikes. Yep.
yeah, were so good
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
lack, they were just quick. They were just professional. Boom, 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 boom. And then you look at the
Yep.
things that, we're struggling to, we're tripping over our own feet.
Even as,
Hell, even at Santa Cruz,
yeah.
we're tripping over our own feet to get, deck load strikes off in a timely
Yeah.
manner.
Well, the Japanese had made some fairly rational decisions in terms of how they did deck operations, that they did not try to break their strikes up and bring additional birds up from the hangars in the middle of these launches. They would just, we would put a package on the deck that fit conveniently on the deck, and that's usually between 27, maybe 30 aircraft or so. That's the amount that we can get off. And it depended to a degree on how many cap fighters would be added to that initial launch as well. That was also typical. There's not just strike planes going off on this, they're also launching the initial cap watch as
Sure.
well. And those are some very disappointed lads because they are not going to be participating in the main attack. They've got to run cap. But in any case, you've got this package of 30 planes, maybe 33 tops, and depending on the size of the flight deck. And yeah, you just get them all off in one swell foop and away they go. But yeah, they would typically be launching these planes at the rate of one every 20 or 30 seconds.
Mhm.
And up they go. And they all have what I want to call assembly areas that are outboard of wherever the carrier is. So if you're in the starboard column, you're going to be launching your planes. They're going to go further off to starboard and just loiter over one of the battleships or the cruisers or whatever. Once we've got the whole group, put together, then all six of those groups come together into their various packages. And it was very sophisticated too up in the air in that you had, groups of fighters, groups of dive bombers, not necessarily um, carrier by carrier. In many cases, they would be division by division. So
Mhm.
with respect to the attack on the anchorage with the torpedo planes, it's going to be the Akagi and Kaga planes that are going to go after Battleship Row. It is the Soryu and Hiryu group that are going to go after the other side of Ford Island, where Utah and some of those other ships are located. So they typically organize their strike aircraft in divisional sized chunks, but then put them all up together. All of those torpedo planes are transiting basically as a group, knowing that when they get north of the harbor, they're going to split
You
into
split.
two and come in. So yeah, what you see here is the results of 6 months of very hard work on the part of the Japanese. Again, back to April 1st, 1941, when the order was given, okay, we're going to build this thing called Kita. They've had to do a lot of nuts and bolts figuring
Sure.
out of how do we launch, how do we group, how do we transit, how do we attack, and all of
Yeah.
that stuff has been ironed out. It's a really tremendous accomplishment.
Yeah. You're building the wheel is what you're
Yeah,
doing here. You're
building the
building the wheel.
wheel. That's a good
Yeah.
way of putting it.
So the first wave, which is what this episode, by the way, just to be clear, so everybody understands, this episode is the first wave. Next week we'll talk about the second wave. So there's too much to talk about when we'd be here for 5 hours. Um, that being said, the first wave consists of 183 aircraft, is what gets off the flight decks and gets going. It's 43 Zeros, 40 Kates with torpedoes, 51 Vals, 49 Kates with the AP bombs. And of course, the AP bombs are what we talked about, the 16-inch
Yep.
shell that's been, you know,
Yeah.
configured.
Machined down into a
Yeah.
teardrop shape and put fins on and yeah, all that stuff.
Fuchida leads this first wave
Yep.
and he breaks it up into three groups. Give us the skinny on the three groups.
Yeah, so the first group is basically slated for attacking the anchorage. So you've got here your high level Kates with the AP bombs. You've got your low level Kates with torpedoes on them, and so there's a mixture here. 16 Kates from Hiryu and Soryu are going to be coming in with torpedoes against the other side of Ford Island. 24 Kates from Akagi and Kaga that are torpedo armed are going to be coming against the anchorage against Battleship Row. And then the remainder, again, 49 with the AP bombs. They're supposed to be 50. They're flying in VIX of 5.
Mm-hmm.
And they have groups from each of the four main carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. The dive bombers are all packaged in group number 2, and the dive bombers are coming from the two junior carrier groups, Shokaku and Zuikaku. And those planes, they're going to be 25 Vals from Zuikaku. They're going to hit Hickam and then head over to, excuse me, not Hickam, Wheeler. They're going after Wheeler. And then after Wheeler, they're going to bingo over to Awa and, shoot it up and strafe it as need be. Meanwhile, the remainder, they're going to be, Ford Island is going to be hit by 9 Shokaku Vals, and Hickam is going to be hit by 17 more Shokaku Vals.
Yeah.
Then group 3 is basically all of your air supremacy assets, all the Zeros, and they're going all over the place. They are accompanying both the strike packages. So there's going to be 14 Zeros that are going to go against Ford Island, 18 Zeros against Hickam, 14 are going to be going to Wheeler and then over to Awa after the Wheeler attack, and then finally 11 Zeros are going to go after Kaneohe from the outset to get rid of the PBYs that are over there, so that again the Americans won't be able to send up scout aircraft and snoop out this force.
Yep. So it's a
It's
big
big,
strike. It's a
big
big strike.
strike.
It's the biggest strike of carrier-borne aircraft to this point in history.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
it's
mean
going to
this
be
is
the
it.
biggest strike all the way up until we get to the American raids on truck in
Jeez,
Feb of 1944,
and
which
that's saying
gives you,
something. Yeah,
yeah, it gives you no other navy in the world could have done this attack at this point in time. Not the British, not the Americans. The Japanese are the only people that could have pulled this off. Yeah.
rather amazing when you think about it.
Yep.
So, taking a sort of a step forward because these guys get up at 0330 ish. At
Yep.
0342, USS Condor, which is a minesweeper, is patrolling outside the harbor when her officer of the deck, a gentleman named Ensign McCloy, spots what he believes to be a submarine periscope. We talked about this in the intro.
Mhm.
They immediately send a message over to Ward, which is the patrolling DD. Hey, come check this out. We think we got a periscope up here. It's making a little rooster tail, and you
Yeah.
need to come see this. Ward does that, goes over there, of course, can't find a dang thing. They
It's
patrol. Good.
middle of the night,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so, yeah.
Yeah. They patrol for well over an hour and in that area, I'm sorry, 30 minutes, and they can't find squat. Like
Yeah.
Outerbridge calls his crew to GQ. They're doing their thing. Can't find a damn thing. More than likely a whale, is what they're thinking. Conversation begins via TBS between Ward and Condor. They're trying to pinpoint the area, trying to bring Ward into exactly where they saw it. And again, searches,
Nothing.
nothing, not a damn thing. Um, Fast forward about another 3 hours ish. USS Antares is making her way into the harbor. She's towing I think it was a garbage barge, if I remember correctly.
Something like, or a target barge. I can't remember. Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. It's just a big barge behind her as she's coming in. They're opening up the anti-submarine nets, which have actually already been opened, because there's a lot of ships that are transiting in and out of the harbor this morning. Pearl Harbor's a working base.
Yeah.
Not everybody's just sitting there,
Right.
sleeping on a
Twiddling their
Sunday
thumbs.
morning.
Right.
Yeah, there's things going on. There's destroyers coming and going. There's different ships coming and going. So the submarine nets have been open for a while. And instead of closing them consistently and opening, open and close, they're just leaving them open because they know there's a lot of traffic coming in and out.
Because we're not in
Well,
a war.
yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And we're not supposed to be attacked. The Philippines are supposed to be attacked. We're not
Right.
supposed to be attacked. Well, as Antares is moving closer into the harbor, there's a PBY that's above the area, and
Yeah.
it's circling over Antares, not over Antares, but over the general vicinity, clearly looking at something. There's something in the water that is attracting their attention. And this is your Minnesota crew
Yeah.
destroyer here.
Yeah. That's
And
right.
this all starts to snowball from here, John.
Right. Yeah. So the ward is, man, there's a lot of Minnesota reserve people on the
Mhm.
ward, and the captain Outerbridge has just taken command of this ship yesterday, as we
Yep.
described in the previous episode. And this is going to sort of factor into some of the communication snafus that are going to happen this morning, in that a lot of the people, I think, in Pearl Harbor proper, when they start getting reports from the war, they're filtering it through, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He's a total greenhorn. He just took over this ship and he's all skittish, and and they got a bunch of reservists on this ship. In any case, it's an old four piper, and so there's,
Mhm.
I think, some emotional discounting of some of the things that Ward ends up talking about as a result. But uh, the net is that's a terrible pun right there. The net is that the OOD again at 0640 sees something and summons Outerbridge to the bridge. He was lying in his bunk,
Mhm.
and Outerbridge gets up on the bridge, takes a look at this thing, and he's like, "Yeah, absolutely, that is a submarine conning tower, and it is basically between the
Yeah.
Antares and the barge that it is towing." And so this conning tower is trailing right along behind the Antares and is catching up to her. At which point, Outerbridge sends the ship to GQ, and they begin moving in on this target.
They move in immediately. And Outerbridge, he doesn't hesitate, and he has a pretty good war history. We could talk about that at another time. He actually winds up having to sink his old ship later on in the
I
Philippines. But
remember that. That's
yeah,
right. Yeah.
yeah. But regardless of this, he's moving in on this thing. He doesn't hesitate at all. He immediately orders open fire because husband Kimmel had issued an order, what, like 4 or 5 days previous,
Right.
that said that
Any
if there's,
submarine,
yeah, if there
any
is a
submarine,
submarine operating in that area,
sink it.
sink it. And let an American flag is going to be flying, hopefully from a surface submarine as it's entering Pearl Harbor. But
Right.
if it ain't, you sink that sucker and you sink it now. So he's following orders from husband Kimmel, and
Yeah.
he brings Ward up to hell from 100 yards away. The first shot is fired from Mount Number One on Ward, and it sails right over the conning tower of this little
Yep.
thing and misses it. As he's pulling closer, Outerbridge, he describes it. He says it's about 80 feet long. It's definitely a submarine, and it's definitely not an American submarine. Doesn't look like
Right.
anything that we have in our inventory. And as they get closer, and I'm talking close, Jackson, is 50 yards away
Yeah.
is
That's
when Mount Number Three, pow, punches
wow.
that thing right at the base of the conning tower.
Yep.
And
And it's funny because for years the guys off of the ward were
Yeah.
not necessarily believed, you know,
Right.
but they all swore up and down, no, we drilled that sucker neat as neat right through the sail. And sure as hell, when they finally found the submarine a number
I
of
mean, it's
years ago, boom. I mean, yeah, and it certainly it must have killed the crew just
oh
outright.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah, you know, shrapnel
absolutely.
down into the command spaces, and you know, glub 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 down she goes, and is lost to sight. At
I
which point, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say I found it. Destroyer skippers are a different breed of cat. They are. They're just a different breed of cat, and Outer Bridge is no different. He brings this thing damn near alongside of
Yeah,
this submarine after Mount Number Three hits it
yeah,
right at the base of the tower, and the whole just boop. And he said because he relayed later that he could see like barnacles on it and all this other stuff that had grown on the hull. So I mean, he
okay,
is close.
yeah,
He pulls past it, and as he pulls past it, he says it kind of breaches and kind of,
I
does
can believe
a
it.
yeah, a dying whale kind of a thing. And then
Right,
when he goes past it, he orders four depth charges to be rolled off the racks of Ward, and
just
kablooey,
making
off they
sure.
go. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
So to your point, he immediately sends a report in, quote, depth bombed sub operating in defensive sea area
Yeah,
immediately. And I mean like within minutes of him rolling those depth charges off the
yep,
racks of that destroyer. He later, and by later, I think it's like 3 minutes later, he's like,
yeah,
maybe that needs to be a stronger worded message. So he sends off another one that says, quote, at 0653 to be exact, attacked, fired on, keyword there, depth bombed and sunk submarine operating in defensive sea area, unquote.
that's
And
pretty
as
explicit.
yeah,
Yeah,
because he was afraid that the first message might be taken as, well, hell yeah, he is a greenhorn
right.
and he just killed a whale.
Yeah,
And which was a common thing,
right.
unfortunately, for the whales in the Pacific in this time.
Yeah,
But when he says he fired at, that means he saw it with his
yes,
own two beady eyes. He saw that target and he ordered his ship to fire at it. So
yep,
there's no mistaking that this wasn't a whale. This was a friggin' submarine here.
yeah.
You know, I put in notes, we should talk about how the report gets lost in the shuffle and to an extent as to how. Because, there's one of the aspects I think of Tora that's a little bit meh. We talked
Hmm.
about how accurate it is, but there are some things
Yes,
that are a little bit Hollywood.
right.
And this is one of them. The report gets lost in an in basket somewhere and sent via Western Union, which to a degree it was. But the report, when Ward sends it off, it's cataloged. It's logged in the books by the
Hmm.
naval radio stations that are hearing all this traffic.
Right,
And it gets to 14th Naval District like now, like right
right.
now. They start acting on this thing almost immediately. But the situation is that it's Sunday. And not
Yeah,
not to make it an excuse, but it's Sunday. And people aren't really going to work on a
yeah,
Sunday morning in Pearl Harbor. So things are moving slower than they should, than they would have moved, say, if it was the following day, if this is a
yeah,
Monday morning.
yeah, yeah. That's absolutely right. So, yeah, I mean, the proper channels are being
Yeah.
used here. It does get over to Logan Ramsey at Pat Wing 2. You know, he gets the message and he's trying to confirm. Um, but you know, the bottom line is, to your point, uh, that yeah, things are kind of working in slow motion here. He wants to be running to put up PBYs to maybe go off and patrol off to the northeast
Yes,
of the island, but that doesn't end up getting carried out before the actual attack starts developing.
it does not. So that Ward's second message goes off at 0653.
Yep,
At 0700,
yep,
Kimmel's on the phone. They've
yep.
got Kimmel on the phone saying, "Hey, Chief, somebody just, one of our destroyers just attacked and claimed that they sunk a
It's
submarine operating off the mouth of the harbor." So, in the 7 minutes, which is not a lot of friggin' time,
no,
frankly,
yeah,
they've got the Commander in Chief Pacific Fleet on the phone, and
yep,
Husband Kimmel is aware that at the very least something has happened out at the mouth of the harbor. Wait, he can't confirm it, but he's like, okay. And he's literally still in his drawers.
Standing in his underwear. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, I'll be right down. And
Yeah.
he's starting to, now he's starting to get himself ready to
Yeah.
go.
Gussed up and ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I,
And
I, I put it, go ahead.
I was just going to say that as you put in the notes here, that the most serious error committed at this time was by the Navy. They never informed the Army
Yeah,
that one of the Navy's destroyers had sunk an enemy submarine. And the point I would make is, yeah, that's all well and good, but if you don't have the inter-service
it's
communications
very true.
protocols set up, there is no joint operations room at this point in time. How do you disseminate that information? Who is going to pick up the phone and call who to let someone
Yeah.
in the Army know that something has happened?
One would like to imagine that Kimmel would have dialed up short and said, "Hey, brother,"
Yeah,
but
right.
as we know, that doesn't happen. But
It does not happen.
the thing that I put in the notes, Prang says, and in dawn we slept, and I loved this passage that he wrote in there. He says, "All this going down points, and I quote, a picture of alert professionals at work, not going off half cocked, nor taking the reports lightly." So there's that whole myth in our
Right.
minds that, oh, Ward, nobody listened to Ward. And if they had listened to Ward, then all of this could have been averted. No, they did listen to Ward. And they
Yes.
were going through channels, as you were saying. They were doing everything that they were supposed to do,
Yeah.
but there's simply, as we're going to see, not enough time. There's just
Yeah.
not enough time.
I think people too have a mistaken belief about what actually could have happened, even
Right.
had Kimmel at 0700
Nothing.
said right then
Or
and
very
there,
little.
yeah, put everybody to GQ and wake everybody up and blah 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 blah. The ships could not have raised steam. There was no way. Steam, boilers, and all that stuff, man, that takes hours to get
Mhm.
up to heat and get everything ready to go so you can actually make your way out of port. It's not like the age of gas turbines that we live in now, that a warship is like, yes, turn on the engines and go. That's
Right.
one of the reasons we use gas turbines, because you can do that. Steam power plants are a completely different animal. So yes, going to GQ right now obviously would have made a difference. We would have had our ships buttoned up. There would have been ready ammunition at the guns. It would have made the first wave attack by the Japanese much more costly. But that's just not how militaries typically operate, too, particularly in the age of telephone communications. Once you get behind the eight ball in these sort of situations, it is terribly difficult to catch up. The beast is large. It takes a while to just kind of get it moving. And again, we're not on a wartime footing, and it's a Sunday morning.
Yeah. And I
This is
mean,
why they're attacking on a Sunday morning, because they are counting on this thing, this sort of
exactly.
event. Right.
Exactly. I mean, it's 7 o'clock. If Kimmel understands the situation, and you can't blame the man here. I mean, you can't say he should have known. He didn't know.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a crystal ball. If he would have understood what it was, you've got 55 minutes before those Japanese aircraft come down that mouth of that harbor, brother. There is nothing going to get moving but a freaking motor whaleboat in
Yeah.
that amount of time to get out of the harbor, as we're going to
Right.
see. Everybody's like,
Yeah.
Nevada. Yeah, well, Nevada had already been working on this problem for
Right.
hours before.
Yeah.
So Fuchida is bringing his people in. Again, this is, rather ironic as they're pulling in the rising sun pops up and it reminds Fuchida, according to what he says, of the
Other flag.
of the national incident. It's a very
Yeah.
emotional moment for him and all this other. And around 7 o'clock, he instructs his radio men in his Kate. I think it wasn't him. It instructs his radio men in the Kate
Yes.
to tune into rather KGMB again.
Yep.
They pick
Again.
up the Hawaiian music. He realizes that, yeah, man, I can hear it in my mind's eye right now. My mind's
Looking
ear, I
good.
should say. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he, at this point, he's like, yeah, I think we're probably good. We're
We're
probably good.
Gucci. Yeah. Yeah.
So Ward is not the only ones with eyes out right now. Of
That's
course, we're
correct.
talking about Opana Point. Let's riff on Opana Point here.
Yeah. So there's a piece of high ground at the northern part of um, Oahu. I've driven by it a number of times.
Mhm.
And yeah, we had one of these. Was it? Is it
A mobile radar
SCR-70?
station,
Yeah,
yeah.
mobile
Yeah, something like
radars
that.
up there, right? And these are relatively primitive beasts, and this puppy does not have anything like we would associate with the radar, namely the plan position indicator, the rotating gizmo. No, no, no. Think more in terms of an oscilloscope. You've
That's
got an
exactly what it was,
A-scope
yeah.
that's, giving you a big ping, and if you maneuver it correctly, you can kind of get a bearing off of this thing. This is not a sophisticated piece of equipment. But yeah, there are two gentlemen up there, two privates, Lockhart and Elliott, who are looking at this contact that suddenly goes bazoing at 0702, and they end up picking up the phone and calling down to Fort Shafter, which is actually down in Honolulu. It's right in the middle of the city there. You can still go there today and go and talk to the ready officer, who is our buddy Kermit Tyler.
Yeah.
Picks up the phone.
Tyler,
Unfortunately, yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, no, go
Yeah,
ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, Tyler, uh, at least by some reports, isn't even supposed to be there that
Correct.
morning. He's only been there once before. So his job as pursuit officer is to take any radar reports and, a la, sort of Battle of Britain, be able to vector fighters out towards that contact and, get in touch with the fighter group. So he legitimately does have, uh, I don't want to say the bat phone, but he could get in touch with,
Kind of.
some of the airfields that have pursuit fighters, and he could dial those guys up if need be, and get some assets up in the air. There's a problem here of communication in that Lockhart and Elliott do not give Tyler an indication as to just how big this blip is and how many aircraft it looks as if it might be, which is over 50, according to
Right.
them. And so,
Right.
without that piece of information in hand, Tyler knows that there's a group of B 17s that are supposed to be coming in from California this morning. He knows that those aircraft typically come in from the north, roughly. And so, upon consideration, he assumes that this blip that these two privates are seeing is these B 17s, and tells them over the phone, well, don't worry about it. And that is the end of that exchange.
That is the end of that exchange. And there's, I remember him saying, and I put that in the notes, he had said, that his friend who was a B-17 pilot at Hickam Field had told him specifically, yeah, when we come in from the mainland, they
Yeah,
play Hawaiian music all night long. Because back in the
right.
day, a lot of times, past, I want to say like 10 o'clock or even sometimes midnight, the radio stations are shut down. Poof, it was dark, nothing.
Yeah,
So for a radio station to be playing music past 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night was a pretty rare thing. It was a notable event. And Tyler, when he went to work that morning at 04, he climbed in his
mhm,
vehicle, fired up the Buick or whatever it was that he was driving, and he hears the music. And he remembered his friend saying, yeah, when the planes are coming in, we home in on that music.
yeah,
And he knew that there was a flight coming in. So when he heard that music, he's like, ah, yeah, that's for
that's
the
what's going on.
B-17s coming in. So when he gets this phone call, it
Logical enough conclusion.
completely logical,
Yeah.
completely logical.
Again,
Eh,
we are not at war.
No,
So,
no.
yeah,
And this is about 0720 when all this
mm,
go when all this goes down, and Fuchida at this point is only 75 miles away,
right.
ish,
Ish.
ish.
Yeah. And
So
by the time they make their final shutdown at 0739, by now Fuchida is only about 20 miles away.
yeah, yeah, they lose them in the mountain clutter, and then they pick them up again as they're coming in, and by that they're like, shut it down, time to go to dinner or time to go to
Yeah.
breakfast. That's
Breakfast.
it.
Yep.
So an alert, I put this in the notes, and this is important because this would have been Short's call. This would have been General Short to say, okay, yep, we got a problem. And
Hmm.
an alert at this point would have only meant a step up in readiness. Planes would have been dispersed, ammunition would have been passed out, and that is it. They would not have
Hmm.
launched any fighters. I mean, to a degree, Tyler had that power, but even still, he had to call his boss. He couldn't
Yeah.
call up Wheeler and say, scramble the, whatever squadron. It
Right.
doesn't work like
That's
that.
yeah, that's over. Tyler's pay grade. It's kind of what
big
it comes
time,
down to. Yeah.
big time. So, according to, as I put, according to Short's orders, no fighters would have been scrambled unless he gave the order to do so.
Right.
And Short is out of touch right now. Like
Yeah.
nobody, to my knowledge, nobody decided to give him a phone call, unlike what they did at Husband Kimmel. So at 0735, Chakuma's scout plane is hovering over Pearl Harbor and observes the fleet at anchor. The pilot immediately snaps off a message describing the ships that were in the harbor and the weather report, which was partly cloudy and essentially very Hawaiian-like.
Yeah.
Then he turns around and heads back to the fleet. Um,
It's
Fuchida clears.
unknown whether Fuchida actually gets that report or not. And understand
Okay.
too that these aircraft are they're operating with radio telegraphs, not with telephones. It's not like this dude is picking up the thing
Right.
and actually yakking. I mean, he's got his backseater is doing that.
Yeah.
Um, so in any case, it doesn't take that long though for Fuchida to figure out, just again, given the complete lack of fighter opposition and that sort of thing, and the fact that the radio station is still humming along in the background, that they have achieved surprise for this attack.
Yeah.
And now it is time for him to make one of its most famous goofs. So
Hmm.
the deal is that as they're coming in, they've got a plan. They've got two different plans in the kit bag, depending on whether surprise has been achieved or not achieved. If they are not in a surprise condition and they're going to have to sort of fight their way in, the game plan is that the dive bombers would go in against the anchorage first to sort of distract American attention and allow the torpedo planes to come in after and deliver their attacks. The problem with that is going to be that you don't want to do that optimally, because dive bombers doing their thing is going to create smoke and oil fires and all that kind of stuff, which could screw up the approach routes for the torpedo planes. So optimally, the torpedo plane should attack first. The deal
Hmm.
is that if Fuchida believes that surprise has been achieved, he is going to fire a single flare out of his command plane to let the whole force know that execute
We
plan
got
A.
him. Yeah.
We
Yeah.
got him. Use torpedo planes go in first. If we don't achieve surprise, we're going to fire two flares to let the dive bombers know, go and do their thing. So Fuchida actually is not coming in the way that he thought he was going to be coming in. There's heavy cloud cover over the center of the island. And so instead of flying right down the middle of Oahu, he ends up actually bringing his force around the western coast of Oahu, which already is going to create problems, because it means that the torpedo planes, instead of splitting up north of the harbor, are going to be splitting up to the west of the harbor, which means that their timing, according to Alan Zim, who's looked into this pretty extensively, would probably have been off in any case. But regardless, Fuchida fires his flare, and that's great, except that the fighter leader does not end up getting wind of this fact. Fuchida can see that the fighter guy is not doing what he should do in these circumstances. So he takes his plane up closer to the fighter leader and fires a flare. At which point, the dive bomber commander, a
Sees
guy
two
named,
flares.
sees two flares. Oh, I guess surprise has not been achieved. We better attack. This guy, Takahashi, is the Hikutaicho of Shokaku. And so, yeah, as a result, the dive bombers start gunning their engines and moving into attack. This is a problem. And with
Yeah.
this is a real problem. Actually, it's going to have really big knock-on effects, because the premature attack by the dive bombers is going to alert the American defenders, and we'll talk about some of the ramifications of that vis-a-vis the torpedo plane attack later on. The bigger problem is that I don't think you can blame this completely on Fuchida. This ultimately, I think the buck stops at Genda's door in this case too. This whole business of using one flare, two flares is stupid for exactly this reason. You can screw up. What if somebody doesn't see the first flare and they see, one
Right.
flare, two flare is dumb. You should have gone red flare, green flare, or something like that, that would have given a more positive indication as to what the actual plan was. And so the result is that whereas sort of the post-war mythology around this attack has always been, oh, it was carried off flawlessly. It's like, no, here's the first of the screw ups. There's another major one in the second wave that we'll get to as well. But the result is that the anchorage is going to be coming under attack from two separate groups of aircraft almost simultaneously. But the dive bombers are going to get there first, and that's going to be bad.
And the dive bombers are going to be the first ones to make their
Yep.
attacks too. So, um, aboard USS Oglala, which is an ancient tub there, there is a gentleman named Rear Admiral William Furlong. This was his flagship. He was the SOPA. He was the senior officer present afloat that morning in the harbor.
On this
Um,
old scow.
on
Yeah.
this old scow that he never
Yeah.
figured he'd ever have to take in the battle either, by the way.
Yeah.
Uh, he is the commanding officer, Battle Forces Pacific. As he's standing there on his bridge that morning, he watches a Val make a dive, drop its bomb, and pull out. And his immediate thought was, quote, what a careless pilot, unquote.
That's a very, very charitable
Yeah,
assessment.
yeah. Yeah, he's thinking this guy's career's ruined. He just dropped a bomb on friggin' Pearl
Yeah,
Harbor.
I'm gonna
As
this red's not
soon,
gonna look good.
yeah, I'm
Yeah,
gonna crucify this guy. As
yeah.
soon as he pulls up, this Val pilot, boom, the big red Hinamaru
The
right there
meatballs.
for all the world to see.
Yeah,
Furlong immediately recognizes that that is not a careless pilot. That is a Japanese pilot, and we are
yes,
under freaking attack. He yells, quote, Japanese, man your battle stations, followed shortly thereafter by, quote, all ships in harbor sortie, which, as we know, some of them do because they're able to,
yes,
but most of them can't. On USS West Virginia, or Weevy, as we call her, Ensign Roland Brooks saw the same explosion that Furlong saw and thought that something aboard California had exploded because the way the ships are lined up, Cali is
right.
closest to the
To
seaplane
the
ramp on Ford Island, which is where the bomb went
yeah,
off.
yeah,
So he sees this explosion go off and thinks, oh Christ, something just blew up on California. We got a problem. He immediately sends away a wayfire and rescue party to go and aid California. What this does is actually it's a good thing for West Virginia because
wakes up
and
the
what's going to be
crew.
it gets
It
a
gets
lot
a
of guys that are
lot of
in their rack up,
up
which is
on the
why
deck.
her casualties are significant, but they're not nearly as significant as they would have been.
Yeah,
And this is all, of course, just a twist of fate. So, at this same moment, the Kates from Soryu and Hiryu are approaching the western side of Ford, lining up on what is, of course, USS Utah and USS Raleigh. Utah, boom, takes two fish immediately and begins to capsize because, as we know, she was an old battleship, Florida class, if I remember correctly,
yeah.
and she's a
Target
target
ship.
ship. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Not exactly world-class watertight compartmentation or anti-torpedo systems on her. So yeah, she's going down immediately, and she's
mhm.
still there.
Yes, she
Yeah,
is. Yes, she
yeah.
is. So Raleigh, which is right astern of her, if I remember correctly,
Hmm.
she takes one torpedo, which floods both of her fire room one and two, and kills her power immediately. She begins to list hard to port as she's starting to roll. And again, this it's a myth that the Americans just kind of stood there, boo, as the attack's going on. No, dude, these guys almost immediately roll into action. Her AAA starts firing as she's starting to roll,
Yeah,
as she's starting to go over. They're breaking out weapons. They're running all over the deck. They're going to general quarters like right now. They are shooting back almost instantaneously. Let's talk about Peter Tomich. There's a lot of medals of
yeah,
honor that are awarded at Pearl or for actions at Pearl Harbor, and some of them, in my opinion, were awarded just because the guy was there. But this is not one of them. This is
yeah,
a chief water tender, Pete Tomich, as they call him. He's aboard USS Utah. He's tending to the ship's boilers because that's his job.
yeah.
As she takes the torpedoes, he immediately starts sending these guys topside, getting them the hell out of the
Get out
fire
of here!
room.
Get out of here! I got this.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
and he.
he's left down below watching the
Mhm.
boilers, and it's difficult to envision just how you think of boiler rooms as being these huge spaces, and they are, but they're all full of boiler,
Kill a
and
machinery. Yeah.
they're often extremely cramped and difficult to maneuver through. I was just aboard the USS Midway back in February this
Hmm.
year, and got a tour, and they took me all through that ship, and I went down into some of the boiler rooms, and this is an enormous warship. And I swear to God, you're in one of those boiler rooms, the inboard boiler rooms, and it is cramped. Just
Yes, it
moving
is.
around there is really, really difficult to do. So now think about what it would be like and repeat that exercise when your ship is literally rolling over and you're trying to, operate at 25, 35, 45, 55 degrees.
Mhm.
Things are going vertical on you. Yeah, it's a pretty in pitch darkness probably too.
Well, that was the thing. He was trying to tend to the boilers as best he could to
Keep power on.
keep power going. And as guys are getting out, he realizes pretty quick, he's like, "Oh, I got to get out of here."
Yeah,
And by the time he tries to get out of there, of course, he can't.
yeah,
And he's still down in USS Utah right now. He's awarded technically the first medal. He's not awarded the medal, but he performs the action for which
yes.
he is awarded the medal. He's the first one at Pearl Harbor, Peter Tomich, who was a an immigrant from Eastern Europe. So
Hmm.
let's talk about Matsumura.
Yeah.
Matsumura is Hiryu's Kate strike leader. What he,
Yeah, and
yeah.
we've got a little diagram here that we should put up on the screen right about
Mhm.
now that shows, first of all, just what the planned torpedo attack looks like. And the thing that's so striking here is that you can see that there are supposed to be Kates attacking basically from all points of the compass. But what ends up happening in the course of this operation is that the waters around Pearl Harbor are incredibly constricted, and not only that, but the harbor itself in many areas is surrounded by buildings. And that means that there are going to be updrafts as air is encountering those buildings. If you're a torpedo pilot, you do not want to be coming in at low level, then having to pop up over some of these warehouses in like the supply depot and then pop back down on the deck to line up your shot against this battleship that is getting, right up in your face. These runs in many cases were less than 15 seconds. And if you pop up over that building, you might have only 3, 4, 5 seconds to get the shot lined up and tell your backseater to drop the fish. So what ends up happening in a lot of cases is that they picked an avenue of approach that gave them a longer
Longest
approach
run.
time. Yeah,
Sure.
which is why we're going to have this parade of torpedo planes coming up the southeast lock against Battleship Row, and the same thing kind of happens on the other side of Ford Island as well. In any case, in the course of that, Matsumura, who's the strike leader over on that side, recognizes Utah as a target ship, and I don't want to be wasting my fish on that ship. And and he's also infuriated when he sees that some of the
Yeah,
less
he is.
experienced pilots are actually dropping against this thing. So he pulls up, goes across Ford Island, and heads for Oglala instead, which is moored outboard of the Helena. And so he now ends up on the other side of Ford Island and drops on her.
Hmm.
So his torpedo, though, apparently goes right underneath Oglala, detonates against Helena, and there's a possibility too that a second torpedo may have actually hit right on the quay next to both of those ships as well, I believe.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, but the result is that that torpedo hit in that neck of the woods doesn't do that much damage to Helena, but Oglala, which is a tub,
Hmm.
gets her seam sprung by this torpedo hit, and there's some classic footage of her just I'm done.
Yeah.
So yeah,
She rolls over. And it's important to note too, we're saying, well, Matsumura didn't attack Utah because it was a target ship. Well, why the hell is he attacking Oglala, which was a scow? Because that's the spot where Pennsylvania usually was parked.
right,
Pennsylvania was usually tied up right there. And as
yeah,
we know, of course, now Pennsylvania is in
in
she's
the
in
dry
dry
dock.
dock that day. So Matsumura's other Kates, however, they wheel around. They go all the way back around, and they're coming in. Do they come in on the same approach as Murata, or in that general vicinity? Because they're coming
Yeah, I
up on
think they're
Battleship Row.
yeah, they do. A
Yeah.
number of them end up aborting and coming up there, which means that yeah, there's none of them are going to be shot down. It's Kaga's Kates that really suffer in the southeast lock. But yeah, the bottom line is that the torpedo plan does not go off according to plan, just
Mhm.
because the pickings over on the other side of Ford Island, where Utah is, are so sparse that some of the pilots at least make an in-flight audible and decide to go over and attack other targets on the other side of the harbor. And the most likely of those targets is the battleships. So,
Big, fat, juicy targets.
yep,
So the men aboard those big, fat, juicy targets, they saw Murata coming in. You
yeah,
know, it's like a freight train coming at them. They saw him coming in.
yep,
Um, they believed, like everyone else did, because you got to remember, all this is happening within minutes. I mean,
minutes.
it's not
Although,
like 20 minutes. It's like 2, 3, 4 minutes. Like boom, 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 boom.
well,
Things are going
the
down.
torpedo attack, some of the Japanese accounts say that the torpedo attack as a whole, with all of the aborts and all of that stuff, may have lasted between 15 and 20 minutes. So on average, they're coming down the southeast lock at least at intervals of, 20, 25 seconds. Some of them are stacked up tighter than that. And we know that by looking at the timing of some of the torpedo plumes. We can see
Hmm.
them on the photographic record that in some cases there are three of those up in the air all at the same time, some going up, some coming down, which gives you a rough sense for the cadence of these torpedo attacks. But this was not over in 2 3 minutes. It was a much longer duration because in
Sure.
some cases the southeast lock pilots as well couldn't get a good run, and they would abort and come back around and take another run at these things.
Right. But that's what I meant is that the guys on the battleships, when they're seeing Murata come in, it's
Yeah.
in the opening minutes of the attack.
Oh,
When the,
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. It's
yeah.
it's very much at the outset. I mean, they're under attack by torpedo planes within a minute
What
or
I was gonna say,
two,
yeah, 2 minutes, 3 minutes tops. Yeah.
yeah, after the first bomb drops on Fort Island. And so here's that problem with the flares again. Yeah.
And then we go back to the boiler situation, and we're going to talk about Nevada extensively next week because her famous run is actually later on. But
Yeah.
her OOD that day was Ensign Joseph Tausig. And Tausig there was one boiler that had been lit throughout the night to provide power for Nevada, and he was going to shift power from one boiler to the next to give that one essentially give it a break. And he'd ordered a second boiler to be fired off at about, I want to say 04 that morning. So this is why, to your point exactly, that even if Kimmel had said, "Hey, everybody get out," it wasn't going to happen. The only reason Nevada was able to move like she did is because Tausig, of course, he didn't know. He had
Yeah.
that second boiler fired up for 4 hours before she ever, weighed anchor and started moving.
Yeah.
Um, I put in the notes here, and I don't think this is arguable, but we need to make a statement here, is that Murata's attack is
Murata
easily
Shigaru.
it's the
Yeah.
most devastating attack of the entire attack.
Yeah. Absolutely. It is going to do the most aggregate damage to the battle line of any of the attacks that come in this morning. And Murata Shigeharu, he is Akagi's torpedo plane commander and is widely recognized within the Japanese fleet as the finest torpedo plane pilot in the fleet. And so he is the guy who has figured out how to get these planes down on the deck, deliver their torpedoes, these specially modified Type 91 torpedoes that are very shallow running, and get them into position to do their thing. So yeah, um, you're looking down the barrel if you're an American sailor at the probably arguably the finest torpedo plane squadron on the planet at this point is
Mhm.
Akagi's, and Kagas are no slouches either. So yeah, these are some very bad dudes that are boring in on you at this point to do you harm.
And they are coming. And
Yeah,
I was unable to clarify because of the chaos of the moment. which battleship first
I don't know.
took a fish? And
Yeah,
it's either West Virginia or
or
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma.
Most accounts say it's West Virginia. In the
Okay.
end, it doesn't matter, frankly.
Yeah.
It really doesn't. But West Virginia's XO, a gentleman named Hillencoter, recalled, quote, I was in my cabin just commencing to dress when at 07:55, the word was passed away fire and rescue party. This is when the bomb goes off and they
Hmm.
believe that California, something blew up. This was followed about 30 seconds later by general quarters. At the same time, 07:55, the Marine orderly rushed into the cabin and announced, quote, the Japanese are attacking us, end quote. Also, just at this time, two heavy shocks on the hull of West Virginia were felt. It seemed as if these shocks were somewhere forward on the port side. No, they were. By this time, I had reached the quarterdeck and the ship was beginning to list rapidly to port. I proceeded along the starboard side until just forward of number 3 turret when there was a third heavy shock felt to port. The planes on top of turret 3 caught fire and there were flames all around the turret top. There was another heavy explosion at this time that threw me flat on the deck. During all this time, the ship was continuing to list to port, and at that time of this latest shock, I should estimate that the list was about 20 to 25 degrees. He
That's
ballparks it.
uncomfortable. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean that's
that's
quick too.
scary.
That's
Yeah,
within a couple of minutes.
yeah.
I called to the sound power telephone watch to tell Central to counterflood, but do not know whether or not this word got through. It did not, by the way. So, I mean, these hits, and again, it's important to understand this. And when we reviewed the Pearl Harbor footage, you can see it. And then you just said it. You see several plumes like boom, 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 boom going
Yeah,
up. I mean, they're boom, boom, boom. They're
popping
coming
off.
in, yeah, within minutes or seconds, even some of them.
Yep,
Um,
yep.
Aboard USS Oklahoma, the situation's not a whole hell of a lot different. Um, it's absolute chaos on board ship at this minute. She absorbs at least 9
I think it's
torpedoes that
seven
we
to
know
nine
of.
I've seen, but
7 to
yeah,
9.
it's a lot. Yeah,
And West Virginia gets about the same. It's 7 to
yeah,
9. I think I can't remember exactly
something like
what it
that.
is. Um,
We've got a diagram at the end of this that'll illustrate all of those hits too. So yeah, it's a fair piece.
it's a lot of torpedoes.
Yeah, and
It's a
Japanese
lot.
torpedoes work. And there, you would think too that there wouldn't be any ambiguity in these numbers whatsoever, but the result in some cases is that it appears that some of the later torpedo hits ended up in exactly the same locations as earlier hits, and so you have an even bigger kaboom happening in that neck of the woods, and so it's almost impossible. Is this one hit or two hits or three? We don't really know. All we know is that the hull here is a mess.
Yeah, absolutely wrecked. And and this is where I think a lot of the mythology about Pearl Harbor comes into play because at this time, aboard these battleships, most of the crews are, unless you got watch, unless you're on watch that morning at that time, you're in your skivvies, you're rolling out of the rack, you might be eating chow, you may be going to work if you had to that morning aboard ship,
Yeah,
but most of the crews are pretty much chilled out.
yeah,
So aboard Oklahoma, this is right before she gets hit. GQ does sound because things are going haywire. And I found this to be rather funny. People are, saying, man your battle stations, and guys are just standing there like, what the hell's going on? And
right.
apparently somebody comes over the 1MC on USS Oklahoma and says, and I quote, man your battle stations. This is no shit.
Yeah, let's make it
Apparently that
clear.
did the trick.
Right.
Everybody's like, oh,
Okay. Oh, that's
okay,
legit then. Yeah, right.
time to move.
Time to move. Yeah.
So one of the guys I knew very well, a guy named Roy Swede Barine, he was in the paymaster's office on USS Oklahoma, and he
Hmm.
was going to work that morning because that day was payday aboard USS Oklahoma, and he
Sure,
was
that's
the
going to be a busy
paymaster.
day. Yeah.
Damn right it is. There's going to be a lot of guys who want that cash,
Yeah.
and he was literally sitting there starting to dole out the cash and make his little piles to pay the people.
Yeah.
And as he's sitting there in his chair in his office, he hears that very same message. This is,
And
man your
this
battle stations. This is
typically
no
the
shit.
paymaster is going to be on the main deck, and so yeah,
Mhm.
he's got a it'd be a teeny tiny little cabin, and he's probably got one porthole, and he looks
Exactly
out at.
one porthole.
That's right.
Exactly. He
Yep.
looks out of the porthole and he sees a Kate, or what he says was a torpedo plane, which we know is a Kate. It
Yeah.
had just dropped the torpedo and it went right over. the area where his office was at that point, and he
Right.
looked out and he immediately said, "The damn Japs," is what is his words, "are attacking us right now." And at that second, bam,
Boom.
torpedo hits the west or hits the Oklahoma. As he said, and I remember this vividly, he says it sprung the door. He said the hatch was kind of half open, half closed because he's in there dealing out cash,
Yeah.
and it boom, it just springs the door right off the hinges, I guess, for lack of a better term. And
Mhm.
immediately, like right now, the ship starts to roll immediately. And he said
Good
that
Lord.
hitch just kept coming. It just kept coming. Bam,
Yeah.
bam, bam, bam. As he's trying to get out of the pay office, he's making his way, he's trying to make his way topside. And in just the minute, 2 minutes maybe, that he's trying to get out and get topside, that section of the hull is already, water is already starting to rise. He said that he had to slosh through the water to get to the top side. He does wind up obviously popping out of the top side.
Yeah.
And as the ship is beginning to roll, he immediately jumps off and jumps into the water and tries to swim away. And as he's trying to swim away, the ship is continuing to roll because Oklahoma goes over like right now.
Yeah.
She
She's
did,
over in like 5 or 6 minutes or something like that. It's very,
yeah,
very fast.
yeah. It does
Which
not
again,
take very long.
it sounds like a lot of time, but um, that isn't a lot of time. If particularly if you're in the engineering department or something like that, and you're down below decks and trying to get up out of this thing, and yeah, that's not going to happen.
No,
So
no. He winds up getting out and he does jump overboard and he gets away. He winds up swimming away. And but as he's trying to swim away, he said this. He said that as the ship was rolling, it was pulling him back, and it kept
yep,
pulling him back. Every time he'd get a little, it was kind of like two steps forward and one step back. He'd get
yeah,
away and then come back, and get away and then come back. And finally, when she went over, and I don't know how long it took her to finally just turn turtle,
yeah,
but at that point, he was able to actually swim back to the Oklahoma because as he's getting out there, he's like, all this crap is flying through the air and water
yeah,
everywhere, bullet splashes and shrapnel. And he's like, the hell with this. I'm not going out there. So he
right,
swims back to the Oklahoma and then
sure,
swims his way around and gets on,
yeah,
what is it? Good gravy, Maryland,
mm,
that's tied up alongside of her and gets
right.
up in there. But yeah, utter chaos that morning. Absolute utter chaos.
I was just going to say, did a little
Kenworthy. Yeah.
real time history during our little break here, and yeah, Oklahoma takes 12 minutes to
12 minutes.
roll over. Yeah,
Okay.
12 minutes, which sounds like a lot of time. It is not a lot of time. Not,
Not when you got a ship full of crew to get off of
yeah,
the damn thing.
right. All in your skivvies. One of the
Mhm.
things that I'm sure that you would be able to remark upon too, having interviewed so many of these gentlemen over the course of your life, is just this whole war through a soda straw
Mhm.
phenomenon and how time gets telescoped. That when you're in the middle of a high intensity combat action like this, that things that took 10 or 12 minutes feel like they only took 30 seconds or something like that because your memory is extremely episodic. You can't remember all the stuff that you did, but it seems like stuff is happening really, really quickly. And I'm sure that that would have been the case on Oklahoma here as well. That
On any of them, but
yeah,
yeah, to if you're saying that real time she rolls over in 12 minutes and Barine says that it was five, well to him it was five
yeah,
because or less because exactly as you're saying as these things are going down, he's remembering the highlights. He's
yes,
remembering when that looking out that window and seeing that Kate, and
right,
he's remembering when that torpedo hits and springs the door.
yeah,
He's remembering trying to force his way out through the rising water in the battleship.
yeah,
And to him, it was 5 minutes,
right,
but clearly it isn't. And
yeah,
and I say that all the time when it comes to veterans' oral histories about, and we talked about this when we were doing the Nautilus stuff, via the chat,
hmm,
is that guys they look at things with blinders on, and that's not saying anything
it's
bad,
not wrong. Yeah,
but you're looking at what you see in front of you. You're not, I
yeah,
mean, yeah, in some cases, Breen did. He got up and he's looking around. He goes, "Holy crap!" There's all
yeah,
kinds of things going on because he can at that time. But when he's on the ship, he's looking right here because he's got one thought in mind: get the hell off of
hell
this
out.
thing
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
And the same thing for some guy at the Tenerife River.
Yeah.
He's looking at what's going on right in front of him. He doesn't know what the hell is going on down the river. So if somebody says, "Oh, I know what, Bob Leckie did," he was 4 positions in. No, you don't.
No,
You
you
don't know
don't.
that. But you do know what happened to you, maybe.
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, no, it's
It just speaks to the incredible you have to use these first person accounts very, very carefully
absolutely.
because a lot of the details that they see are in fact legit, but trying to place that account within a larger temporal context, if you will, is extremely difficult in many cases. So,
It is. And oral histories get a bad rap because of that. But if you I hate to sound too big-headed, but if you know what the hell you're talking about when these guys
right,
are telling you these things,
you're able to fit it into that context.
you can figure out pretty quick if they're right or they're wrong. And you're not going to say, "No,
Right.
sir, you're wrong." You're not going to do that because you're not a complete rude ass. But you can sit there and go, "Okay, yeah, that's he's right, but it didn't happen now. It happened
Correct.
20 minutes later," or whatever the case
Yeah.
may be. Or it
Yeah.
wasn't on his left, it was actually on his right, but he remembers it for whatever reason. And you
Yeah.
have to be able to take the pieces, parts, and triangulate that into the story. You can't just take it verbatim
Right.
because 9 times out of 10, it did not happen like that. So you
Yeah.
really
And
got to
that
know your stuff.
unfortunately, that is a problem with a lot of,
Yes.
I hate to say it, amateur historians when they read something in a book. This guy, he was there and he said this
Right.
happened, and then they just take it at face value, and it's like you got to be very, very careful with this stuff.
Very,
You
very
need
careful.
you need to understand what's happening in the larger unit, or anyway. So
Yeah. But it's 100% true. And that's why, like we're reading and we're fixing to read, something from Commander Jesse Kinworthy, who
yes,
was
let's
on
do that.
USS Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And this was taken right after the event. He writes the here's portion of the after action report, like within days of
Yes.
Oklahoma. So it's the most accurate account available at that time.
And this is one of the things that my co-author Tony Tully and he's done a lot of this kind of stuff too. He's really gifted at pulling apart first person accounts, and he's like, when in doubt, always take the account that it was written first or relayed
Yep.
orally first, because they typically are the least embellished
Hmm.
and yeah, the closest to the actual events, and so the memory is not as affected by other people telling you what it is that you think you saw.
Exactly.
So anyway,
Or what you saw in a movie.
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
So to that end,
To
Jesse
that end.
Kinworthy, Commander Jesse Kinworthy of the USS Oklahoma says, and I quote, at approximately 0757, the word was passed to man the anti-aircraft battery and the sound of gunfire was heard. The word was again passed that this was a real attack, and we already talked about that.
Hmm.
For all unengaged personnel to seek cover. As I reached the upper deck, I felt a heavy shock and heard a loud explosion, and the ship immediately began to list to port. Oil and water descended on deck, and by the time I had reached the boat deck, the shock of 2 more explosions on the port side was felt. I attempted to get to the conning tower over the decks, slippery with oil and water. I felt the shock of another very heavy explosion on the port side. By this time, the ship was listing 25 to 35 degrees and was continuing to list further. It was now obvious that the ship was going to continue to roll over, and I climbed over the boat deck towards the starboard side. Men were beginning to come up from below through hatches and gun ports, and like my buddy Swede. And from then it was learned that the ship was filling with water in many spaces below. As I reached the starboard side, I met Lieutenant Commander Hobby, the first lieutenant, and with him concluded that the ship was fast becoming untenable and that an effort should be made to save as many men as possible. At this point, they call abandoned ship on Oklahoma, which any guy with 2 eyes and gray matter in your head is already like,
Yeah.
yeah, brother, I am
Yeah.
gone.
I'm way ahead of you.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about California, John. California, she wasn't the
Further up.
target of the first bomb, but she's way up the line up there.
Yeah, she is at anchor by herself,
Hmm.
tied up to one of these mooring piers here. And so, unlike the other ships that are two by two down the row here, um, although not necessarily two battleships at a time. So, for instance, Arizona is
Hmm.
moored next to the Vestal,
Vestal. Yeah.
the repair ship Vestal. But yeah, California is all by her lonesome out here. And so about 10 minutes into the attack is the first time that she comes under attack. There's a bomb that explodes just off of her starboard bow when the attack began, and that's this initial dive bombing attack by these Vals. But the result of that is that she very quickly mans her guns, and at 8:05, her 50 cals begin cutting loose, followed very shortly thereafter by the 5-inch weapons on her port side, which would be the ones that would be facing up the southeast lock towards these torpedo planes that are coming in. But almost immediately after that, she is hit by torpedoes. She is wide open for inspection at this point, which means that none of her watertight doors were closed. And so those torpedoes, as you might imagine, immediately cause catastrophic flooding below decks. She too begins to roll over. But fortunately for her, an ensign Edgar Fane realized that this was occurring and immediately began on his own initiative the act
Yes.
of counter flooding, which would end up saving the ship.
Yeah. And if you go back and look at and I'll put it here, if you look at the footage that we showed when we were talking about Arizona detonating, and we'll get to that in just a minute,
Yeah,
you can see it's we know it's West Virginia, but she is rolling, and we'll talk
yeah,
about her counter flooding here in a second too. But these things, California, Oklahoma, West Virginia, their sides are ripped open like a tuna can,
yeah.
and they are going over. So I mean, he acted quickly and saved that ship, frankly.
What it says, it just speaks to the very high caliber of damage control expertise that we have on these warships. That
Hmm.
you can make a credible argument if this had been battleships of a different navy, that one or more of these other battleships would have gone over with catastrophic loss of life and probably the loss of the ship entirely. I mean, Oklahoma is never going to be returned to service. It could well have been that. Well, you can make an argument that West Virginia really wasn't either. I mean, she doesn't get back into service until the middle of 1944. But
Yeah,
regardless, she does not end up going over, and that's the material point. So
yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about what's happening on the Japanese side of the
Do
attack
it.
at this point. So, we have this diagram of the planned torpedo attack versus the actual torpedo attack. And as I sort of mentioned, the Southeast Lock becomes this sort of conveyor belt of Kates that are coming in to deliver these attacks against Battleship Row. And the fact that the dive bombers came down a couple, 3 minutes before the torpedo attack actually starts happening means that some of the smaller combatants that are moored along the Southeast Lock are able to get to action stations, in particular, the destroyer Bagley,
Mhm.
which is given this sort of grandstand seat of these planes whipping by. She very quickly gets her 50 cals into operation and starts taking pot shots at a lot of these planes that are going by. The other thing that's happening too is that Akagi's package was the lead package. Kaga's is following 70 seconds behind that, and two, they are coming in one at a time. It's not like they're flying three, four, five planes abreast
Right.
down. The Kate is a big plane. Kate is a 50-foot wide airplane. And
Man,
so they are coming
didn't
in.
realize it was that big.
It is that big. They're coming in sequentially as a result. And so that, and two, some of those planes that were supposed to be attacking on the other side of Ford Island that aborted because there weren't any good targets over there. Some of the Hiryu and Soryu Kates likewise are probably in the mix as well. So the Southeast Lock is kind of a mess at this point in terms of the Japanese attack. And the net result is that the Japanese are going to lose 5 Kates over the Southeast Lock. And that is really the price that they end up paying for the attack against Battleship Row. Those 5 Kates are almost universally, they're all tail end Charlies. They're Kates that came in the latter end of the attack, and Bagley claims to have at least gotten a piece of 4 of those. Of course, you have multiple ships that are all taking shots at, and that was
Sure.
recognized by the American accounts. The other thing I wanted to point out here is that there's another ship that is moored in this general neck of the woods on Battleship Row that does not receive so much as a single torpedo, and that is the tanker Neosho, which
Mhm.
was loaded with, I believe she had avgas in her, among other things. Um, she, if she had been hit, man, that could
Oh,
have
a
been
big
a,
kaboom.
a holocaust. And what that says is that the target identification for these pilots was at least good enough for them to recognize that's a tanker and I don't want any part of that. I'm going to put a fish into the battleships. This sort of echoes forward to this whole fuel tank myth that comes into Pearl Harbor. Why didn't the Japanese go after our fuel tanks? Because they don't care about logistics. That's why.
Right.
And if they had cared about logistics, they would have moved tankers and shore facilities a lot further up on the target list than they did. And evidence of that is the fact that Neosho is basically sitting in the middle of this whole time, with Arizona going up astern of her and Weavy and the whole schmack, and she doesn't get a scratch on her. In the
Mhm.
interval between the first and second wave attacks, her captain very wisely is going to say, "We should be elsewhere," and back, backs her out of there and puts, I don't know where she ends up in the harbor, but she ain't there for the second wave when they come in with the dive bombers. So anyway, let's talk about the horizontal attack.
Let's do that. So this is Fujita's battleship killers that are coming in that are going to
Yep,
get target the inboard battle wagons. It's going to be
yep,
Maryland. It's going to be Tennessee. It's going to be Arizona.
Arizona.
They're all going to be the ones that are inboard alongside
Although
shoreline
California
of.
collects a couple of these as
Right,
well.
right,
Yeah.
right.
So the general pattern is that they're going to move up Fort Island, basically going from bow to stern over our battleships. They're coming in. They've got 10 packages of 5 aircraft apiece. They are flying at about 3,000 meters, which is over 10,000 feet. The reason they're that high is that you've got to give these bombs enough vertical drop
Yeah,
that they will
they're
pick up speed. The
punch through.
Japanese, yeah, got to punch through because the armor deck on these ships in many cases is a roughly a 4.8 to 5 inch deck plate, and in some cases a 1 inch splinter plate that is a deck above that. So you've got to be able to punch through the better part of 6 inches worth of armor. Japanese claim that they could do that even from an altitude of 8,000 feet, and these guys are dropping from over 10,000 feet. And at this altitude, that 16-inch armor piercing bomb can go through the better part of 7+ inches of deck armor. So they've absolutely got the penetration. The Achilles heel for these things is going to turn out to be that their fuses are not necessarily all that great. But nevertheless, the game plan is that they're coming in VIX of 5 aircraft, and the four trailing planes are all watching that lead plane who's got hopefully the best bombardier in that fivesome. When that dude drops his bomb, all the other four planes drop their bombs. And unsurprisingly, that means that they are going to come down in V's as well, which allows us to sort of, from a forensic standpoint, we don't know where all the bombs ended up because in many cases these bombs ended up in the harbor mud.
Right.
And Lord, and they're probably still, a lot of them are probably still there, honest to God,
Could
and
be. Yeah.
probably 80 feet down in the mud because this is a damned heavy weapon. um, but the bottom line is that they start coming in as the torpedo attack is still ongoing, and they are dropping in groups of 5 on these inboard battleships. So each one of those battleships is going to collect 2 of these separate attacks, and a number of these bombs end up hitting, in many cases, on relatively heavy armor on the turrets, and
Yeah.
either the fuses don't work or the bomb is degraded and ricochets off the front plate. That happens on at least one of these battleships.
Happens in
um
Tennessee. Yeah.
yeah, so that's what's
Happens in
going on
Tennessee.
at this point. Yeah,
And speaking of Tennessee, she does, like you said, she does collect one and it bounces up. Well, I don't want to say bounce, but it boom skips off of one of her main battery turrets and explodes on or near the deck. And either the shrapnel from the weapon or the shrapnel from the ship
yeah.
just goes. it goes
Yeet.
everywhere. And of course, moored next to Tennessee is USS West Virginia, which is already collecting torpedoes and is already starting to roll at this point. Her captain, Mervyn Binion, is on the starboard bridge wing, directly
Mm.
next to Tennessee.
Closest to
Yeah,
Tennessee. Yep.
literally, like right here next to her,
Yeah.
when this bomb ricochets and goes off. He's discussing the situation as West Virginia is, continuing to roll. Um, when Lieutenant Claude Ricketts from wwii runs up and suggests counterflooding because, hey, we're
Right.
going over here, Chief.
Yeah.
Uh, Ricketts immediately, he just goes, and it's better to ask for forgiveness and permission. He'd already actually started the counterflooding operation when he goes up and says, hey, we ought to counterflood,
By the way,
just
yeah.
so you know.
Thank you,
And
Mervin.
it does wind up obviously saving West Virginia because, of course, she plunks down right in the mud. But when this bomb goes off on Tennessee, something either from the bomb or from Tennessee just scythes right through West Virginia's starboard bridge wing and essentially disembowels,
Eviscerates. Yeah.
yeah,
Benyon. Yeah.
Binion right there. And he hits the ground
Keels over.
yeah. He doesn't die. He is literally sitting there holding his
His
innards
guts in. Yeah.
in. Yeah, it's a terrible situation. Um, one of the sailors aboard, I'm sorry, the navigator aboard West Virginia, Lieutenant Beatty, recalled, quote, the captain doubled up with a groan and stated that he had been wounded. Yeah, he had. I saw that he had been hit in the stomach, probably by a large piece of shrapnel, and was very seriously wounded. He then sank to the deck, and I loosened his collar. I then sent a messenger for a pharmacist mate to assist the captain. I was very anxious to get the captain on the forecastle and send him to the hospital to get some lines and a stretcher and lower him down from the bridge. He sent word back that the captain was very much against being moved and that he preferred to stay where he was, unquote.
Yeah.
So, of course, immediately the thought is going to be Doris Miller. And we're going to talk about Doris Miller, but not this week, because what happens to Binion is an ongoing thing. This goes on for a good 15 minutes ish,
Hmm.
because Ricketts is one of the guys. He comes back. This is after, he starts the counterflooding. He goes ask Binion for permission. This thing hits him, and then he turns around and starts trying to tend to Ricketts at this point. I mean, at to Binion at this point, and then someone Miller gets involved. So we're going to talk about Dory Miller, but we're not going to
Yeah.
talk about him this week. Um, West Virginia and her captain, as I said, are dying. The Arizona, which is astern of all of this, as we said, is moored next to inboard of USS Vestal. At this point, the string of Kates, high level Kates, are reaching her position. She
Yep.
comes under attack too, and
Yep.
of course we know what happens here. But let's get into it.
Two different attacks on her. The first is from a Vic from the Kaga under Lieutenant Maki Hideo, and they land one hit that bounces off Arizona's number 4 turret, pierces the deck down into the captain's pantry. The Vestal, which is right next to it, likewise was hit with one bomb that comes through the starboard side at frame 44. The other 3 bombs are near misses. And then a few minutes later, Hiryu comes in with a package of 5 under Lieutenant Commander Kusumi Tadashi, and his bombardier is Lieutenant Kondo Shojiro, and they release from 10,480 feet. And 25 seconds later, that bomb lands. As we saw on some of the Pearl Harbor footage from that other episode, you can actually see the plume of water from one of the near misses that is
Right.
off the starboard bow of Arizona, but she does get hit. And I am in line here with John DiVirgilio's analysis of the situation that she took a bomb basically abreast the number 2 turret that penetrates the deck armor, goes into one of the 3 powder rooms that are on the starboard side of the ship. And within the space of about 3 or 4 seconds, cooks off that powder room, which then proceeds to fill the whole forward end of the ship up to the armored bulkhead that's just in front of turret number 1 with superheated gases. Those gases, in turn, cook off the remaining 5 powder rooms, and now you've got a grand total of 582 tons of ordnance that go up. Since the ship is already mostly full in the forward part with these superheated gases, there's no place for this larger detonation to go but to yank the front of the armored deck up like a tin can and vent that pressure forward into both sides. And so you see this enormous explosion. Some of the pressure, of course, is going to the back. That's going to blow all of the boiler residue and whatnot vertically up out of her
Beautiful.
stack. Yeah, which you can see, very pointedly in the footage of her as well. But within that 7-second time span, probably around 1,000 of her crew are dead. And as soon as that initial blast is vented, the heavy barbettes and armor deck now collapse back into the flaming void that was the forward compartments of this ship. And in the process of that, end up pancaking her forward decks down and dragging her forward superstructure down into the pit. That's why it's canted forward in the way that it does. And so, yeah, that is how Arizona meets her end.
A gentleman named Ensign Hine was near the bridge. He was a very
And
lucky
it's
man.
remarkable lucky that he was alive. Yeah.
When her forward magazine went kaboom, he said, quote, suddenly the whole bridge shook like it was in an earthquake. Flame came through the bridge windows, which had been broken by gunfire. We three were trying to get out the port door at the after end of the bridge during all this shaking, but could not. We staggered to the starboard side and fell on the deck just forward of the wheel. Finally, I raised my head and turned it and saw that the port door was open. I got up and ran to it, ran down the port ladders, passing through flames and smoke, end quote.
And
Uh,
just a sidelight here, I mean, through the photographic analysis of the footage, we can see the bridge of the ship, and the
mhm.
bridge and the forward gun director are heaved up 30 feet by this explosion. It happens within the space of one or
Yeah.
two frames of that film. So the fact that he wasn't even just chucked into the overheads by the acceleration of that, I mean, I'm sure it felt like an earthquake because, yeah, her
Yeah.
entire superstructure is yoinked up by about 30 feet during that.
Yeah. Another gentleman, Ensign Davison, said, quote, the boatswain's mate and I were trapped in the booth by the flames. I don't know where Davison was. I got to be honest with you. I
Yeah,
do not know. We started out of the booth. What booth he's talking about, I do not know. Trying to run through the flames aft on the quarterdeck. We couldn't get through, so we went to the over the lifeline into the water. I was conscious of a sweetish, sickening smell to the flame. Of course, we know what that is.
yeah.
After I got in the water, my first intention was to go to the quay and then onto the quarterdeck or swim to the gangway and get aboard. But after I took one look at the ship, I decided that it was useless. She had settled down by the bow and appeared broken in two. The foremast was toppled over. She was a mass of flames from the forecastle to just forward of turret three.
Yeah. And we pointed out when we were doing that footage analysis that really her after fighting masts, that's sort of the demarcation line. If you were behind that, you
Yep.
had a chance to make it out of that. And very few guys forward of that, you know, these two accounts being just a handful of them.
Yeah.
And then Don Stratton, obviously, as well.
Yeah.
So,
Stratton is in, so he's enlisted man. He is in one of the forward gun directors on the port side of Arizona's
mhm,
bridge. And he was in there. He was because he'd gone to general quarters like everybody else did when he got the call when the ships, went to GQ.
yep.
That's where his battle station was, and he was in there. So when this
And
bomb went,
Sam Fuquay is in there with him too, right?
no,
Uh,
Fuqua is a damage control officer.
oh, okay.
Fuqua is he's up near he's near midships
Okay.
is where he is, and we talk about him in a second. But Stratton is in the gun director when the bomb goes off, and I remember him saying this, and he I remember this vividly because I've seen my dog do it. He says it was like a dog shaking a rat. He said it like the whole ship just went and
Yeah.
shook, and it did blow him all up inside that gun director. It like
Of
tossed him
course it
around like
did.
a rag doll.
Yeah.
Didn't knock him out, or if it did, it didn't. He wasn't out very
Not for
long
long. Right.
because got his senses about him, he realized pretty quickly that he was literally cooking to death.
Right.
Because if you look at the footage, which I'll show here, the flames are licking that forward gun director. I mean, they're
Yeah.
it's he's in a freaking oven is what he
Yeah.
is. And he gets out of there by the grace of God, and he is burned horribly,
Horribly.
horribly burned. He winds up going hand over hand over
Right.
via a line to the Vestal.
They see him over there or something, don't they? And they fire a
I,
line.
well, I think a lot of people started firing lines, and that's another story we could talk about real quick too. Is of
Yeah.
course the captain of the Vestal is Cassin Young,
Right.
and Cassin Young is awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions aboard USS Vestal right now.
Hmm.
And of course, Cassin Young becomes the captain of the USS San Francisco, and he's killed on Friday the 13th, or he
Right.
dies the
Yeah.
following day. But regardless, um, yes, they do start firing lines or throwing lines or something to get these guys who are trying to get off of Arizona
Yeah.
onto Vestal, as you know, because I mean it's quite evident that the ship is it's
Toast.
wrecked, it's
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
And
Demolished.
Stratton's one of those guys that goes hand over hand, and when he gets over there, I can't remember if it's when he's on the line or when he gets over there. It's his they talk about the skin coming off in sheets.
Yeah.
That was done. He was
Yeah.
horribly, horribly burned. He was one of the very few survivors that were up on that forward part of the ship to
Yeah.
make it out alive.
Right.
Now, Sam Fuqua was the DC officer. He was damage control officer, and he had, and I'm not making light of this, but he had a lot of things to do on that morning. God
Yeah.
bless his heart. I mean, he's running all over creation trying to get things done. He's the one that initially orders abandoned ship. Not that there's really any question as to why,
Right.
but he is back in there. Even though he's ordering people off the ship, he's staying in there trying to fight the fires. He's trying to pull wounded people out, or he is pulling wounded people out, getting people out of there, trying his best to save what he can of the ship to keep the fires from spreading aft, which he successfully does, actually.
Yeah.
And he too is awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions aboard Arizona that morning. Um, we talked about husband Kimmel in the beginning of this. He gets on the phone at 7 o'clock in the morning and says, "Oh, hey, there's a disturbance, if you will, out in the entrance to the
Hmm.
harbor." Well, this is about 58 minutes later. What time does Arizona get hit? Do we know if it was like 8:04 or something like that?
I think it's a little later. I think it's like 8:07 or something,
But
maybe.
it's in that general
It's
first
yeah,
10
it's
minutes, eight. Yeah.
yeah, it's in the first 10 minutes of the bedlam that are happening here. Yeah.
Kimmel is in his house, which is up on Makalapa Hill, which is going to become Nimitz's house. The house was brand new at the time.
Yeah.
And when all this is going down, after he receives the phone call and he's getting dressed and he's trying to get the hell out of the door, a car comes by and it eventually is going to bring him down to his office. But he goes out there and he just stands there and watches everything go down. And he's standing out with his neighbor, a Mrs. Early is her name, or was her name, and she said of Kimmel, quote, "He was in utter disbelief and completely stunned. His face was as white as the uniform he wore."
Yeah.
Kimmel later said, he said, quote, "You could plainly see the rising sun on their wings." Obviously, he's talking about the Japanese. "The sky was full of the enemy. I saw Arizona lift out of the water, then sink back down, way down," unquote. You know, History has been unkind to Kimmel, and we concluded last week when we talked about this that there were some things he probably could have done, but at
Yeah.
this stage, there's nothing he could do. There was
Yeah.
nothing he could have done, and you gotta feel sorry for the man. You really do. I
Yeah.
do. I do anyway. I don't know about you, but
Yeah. Yeah. You can't even imagine what he must have been feeling at that point.
his fleet is dying,
Yeah.
and there's a damn thing he can do about it.
Nothing he can do about it. And it's clear. I mean, he witnesses Arizona's demise, and he knows right there that
Yeah.
we're looking at a massive number of casualties as a
Yeah.
result of this attack.
Absolutely,
Talking
absolutely.
thousands of people at this point. There can't help but be. So,
Before we move on to the attacks on the airfields, which we're going to do here in just a second, again we've said it throughout this episode, but it's important to note that American sailors, Marines, and as we're going to see here in just a second, soldiers, they didn't just stand there and
yeah,
watch the scenes go down as history has often painted it. They sprung into action immediately. This is not just a band of Johnny come latelys. These guys are for the most part.
This is a well-trained Navy, and
Professionals. Yeah.
yes, they understand what they have to do, and the training is taking over in this case. And yes, they're getting into action very, very quickly.
Let's talk about Hickam. So, what's going
Yeah,
on at Hickam here, John?
yeah. And really, at this point, we sort of have to almost backtrack because,
Right.
again, I think that there's a tendency on the part of the typical reader or viewer to always think just to over focus on what's happening on the anchorage. But the actual reality is that even before the attack on the anchorage, a number of our airfields on this island are getting hit. Actually, the first one to get hit is Wheeler, but we're going to talk about that last for narrative reasons that you will understand in due time, dear listener. But let's talk about what's going on at Hickam. So nearly half of the aircraft, the Japanese aircraft that are in this attack, are slated for air suppression and air supremacy roles. And so Hickam and Ford Island are obviously going to get clobbered at the very same time. So the Imperial Navy wanted to make sure that they were going to have supremacy over the island and also make sure that the American search assets and strike assets that could potentially hit their battle fleet were wiped out to within the best of their ability. So at Hickam that morning, they're waiting for the B-17s to come in at this
Correct.
point.
Correct.
And so those 17s are supposed to be rolling in about 0800, and lo and
Yep.
behold, you're in the middle of the attack. So Hickam is hit by valves from Shokaku. 17 of them come down into various dives, and then a number of those aircraft are going to be strafing after this as well. And there are also a number of Zeros that are involved in this attack. The first targets are the Art Deco hangars that sprawled across the inner part of Hickam. And unfortunately, as normal civilians can't go on to the base, I've been there once, but the hangars are still there and they're still really, really cool. You know, they do have
Yeah.
all the Art Deco fonts and that kind of thing. So they're hitting those hangars. They're also hitting the Hawaiian Air Depot. The hangars were targeted because the Japanese assumed that the B-17s would be housed inside them. And again, they want to get rid of those strike assets. So the hangar and its chow hall were both hit by bombs and destroyed basically at the outset. In the control tower, operations were also underway to receive these B-17s when, quote, a bunch of planes diving were heard by the men inside.
What the
Um,
hell?
yeah, what the hell? The Army aviators assumed that the aircraft were probably, maybe the Navy doing something crazy or who knows. And
Yeah.
they certainly didn't expect Japanese. Another bomb exploded in another hangar. A repair building was hit. Supply building. The enlisted men's mess hall was also hit. And unfortunately, that mess hall was full of men at morning chow, and so it killed 35 of them immediately. Up until that point actually have been relatively light casualties. But it is interesting, even to this day, if you get to go on base, you can still see the bullet holes in the walls of the dormitories there and whatnot, the barracks that are still there left over from the attack. Because, yeah, there were a lot of low level strafing runs that were going on as well.
Yeah. And this Hickam, as you were saying, is, it was a buzz with activity waiting for these 17s. So, to a degree that was a blessing for some guys because they weren't in the barracks when the barracks got hit.
Yeah.
But some of those guys were also eating chow, as you were saying. So a second attack comes in. These are the guys from Chicago, right?
Yeah, well, they're all from Chicago, but they
Oh, they're
come
all from
in.
Chicago. I'm
They're
sorry, my bad.
all from Chicago. Yeah, Zuikaku's guys are slated with hitting Wheeler. So it's
Gotcha.
Shokaku that goes after both Hickam and Ford Island, and then
Gotcha. Gotcha.
packages of Zeros as well from a number of different flight decks.
Yeah, I found that this was kind of rather comical that one of the hits that was sustained at Hickam was the stockade.
Right.
It hit the stockade, blew the wall out of one side of the stockade, and all the prisoners are like, goodbye. And they all run out of the building. But unlike,
To,
you would think to
to their
scatter like,
credit,
yeah, they go and try and retrieve whatever kind of
weapons.
firearm they can to return fire. And these guys weren't like, going to be hanged or anything. These guys were probably
Now
being there drunken brawl or
they were
something.
drunk, or
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So as all of this chaos is unfolding, the B-17s, talk about a hell of a way to enter a
yeah.
war, are arriving at this moment. And these guys had been on a, what is it, 14
14
hour
hour
flight
flight. Yeah,
in a B-17. I've flown in the B-17 five different times. It is not a comfortable aircraft to fly in for an
yeah,
hour, much less 14
14.
hours.
Yeah.
Um, they
Anybody
had
who's flown to Australia can attest that even getting off a
horrible.
commercial airliner after 14 to 16 hours, you're like,
Yeah.
just get me
Yeah.
off this damn thing. So yeah, I
Let
can't
me
imagine.
off. So
And
these
unfortunately,
guys,
these
yeah,
guys have skeleton crews and they don't have any ammunition either.
not a bit,
So yeah,
not
you're
a bit.
flying into the middle of this attack and you have no defensive armament with which to defend yourself. That's not a happy feeling.
Not at all. And there's a lot of pictures and imagery from of these 17s coming in, and I'll show that here and there throughout this. These guys are from the 38th and the 88th Reconnaissance Squadrons. And as they're coming in, they're all supposed to land at Hickam, by the way. And
Hmm.
as they're coming in, I can't remember the gentleman's name, their CO at that moment, but he essentially tells them, "Hey, every man for yourself. Get the hell out of here. Go and just go. Just put
Find
yourself down
something.
and
Yeah.
be well."
Yeah.
Of the 12 that are coming in,
That's 1941 for peace out, I believe. Is that
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, pretty much.
Godspeed.
One one ground loops at Bellows, two
Okay.
land at Alieva, one lands on a golf course, and the other eight landed at Hickam itself. Not all of them were attacked initially, because again, there's photographs of this. You'll see there's big old B-17 engine nacelle, and off to the side are a couple of valves just hanging out, watching them
Right.
as they're coming in. However, as they are coming into land, the cap, for lack of a better term,
I'm
of
laughing. It's just what a horrible, horrible
yeah,
feeling to be in this plane.
yeah,
And I've got nothing to shoot back with. And those
nothing.
guys out there, do
Yeah,
not wish me well.
no, they
Yeah.
do not. And
Yeah.
those A6Ms that we talked about that were trying to achieve or had achieved air
Yeah.
supremacy, they were up there to shoot down any fighters American fighters that may arise. Well, there ain't none right now.
Yeah.
There will be, but there aren't any at this moment. So they now start making runs on these big old B-17s. One of the guys that does this is Itaya, who is the first man to lift off of Akagi. He makes several runs
Yeah.
on a B-17, and he hits
Destroys one of them.
well, kind of, sort of. He hits inside the waist, and he hits like right by the radio room, and it's like a flare or something goes off in there.
Mm.
So whatever he hits, it's like again, it's a flare or something goes, and immediate aircraft fire. Not what you want in an airplane. They put the airplane down, and it just burns like a damn Roman candle.
Right.
And that's that famous picture of that half a B-17.
Yes. Right.
That's the one that
That's that.
Italia winds up hitting, that the flare or something goes off inside and
Yeah.
burns the thing apart.
Yeah.
So now, because there's no real aerial targets, these A6Ms start strafing and they shoot the living hell out of this place.
Yeah. Yeah. They absolutely go for it. So, um, they get the B-17s that are parked outside that are already been there previously. There are some B-18 Bolos that are there. They get it. Again, some of these guys come in as many as 3 or 4 times, shooting
Yeah.
up the tarmac, shooting up anything they can anything they can see. So again, that's why you still to this day can see a lot of bullet holes in the walls around here. So.
Yeah. Unlike the Anchorage, where the AAA was almost immediate,
Hmm.
the return fire over Hickam was initially scarce, and the reason for that was because, I mean, guys aren't walking around with firearms out there on Hickam Field
Right.
on December 7th. Those weapons are in the armory, and it's not only that sometimes, in some cases, the ammunition was stored in, excuse me, stored in different, I know it is here, stored in different places. The weapons are here, and the ammo is way the hell over here.
Yeah.
So it took a little bit, and all those places are locked under lock and
Yes.
key.
Yeah. You
And
had numerous instances of people, going in and just breaking the locks or shooting them off or
exactly,
doing whatever they can do. The other
exactly.
thing, of course, just from a firepower generation standpoint, there aren't a lot of heavy weapons on this airbase. I mean,
No.
one of the nice things about the Anchorage is you're on a warship, and these battleships have got a dozen plus 5-inch guns and it's right over there. All I have to do is get the shells coming up to it. There isn't that same
Mhm.
um, scale of heavy ordnance on these airfields, and that's going to be the case at Kaneohe and also at Wheeler. That a lot of the defensive firepower that we're able to put up is really small stuff. It's 30s and
Yeah,
50s by and
small
large.
arms. Yeah,
Yeah,
small arms.
rifles in a lot of cases.
A lot of
Yeah,
cases, BARs and things like that.
right. Anything.
There's when these guys are grabbing these weapons, they're being told, take, get behind something and shoot at it. I mean, again, these are trained soldiers, but they also realize pretty quickly that that eliminates a lot of your field of fire. So there are
Mm.
many instances of these cats running out in the middle of the freaking tarmac and just cutting loose, like John Wayne style, with,
Yeah,
automatic
that's
weapons at Japanese airplanes that are flying over, which is just
the
ballsy as
only way
all
I can get a
hell.
beat on them is to be out there in the open. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, some of these guys are going to collect their just desserts as a result of being out in the open like that. So, final result at Hickam is that the base is pretty smashed up. I mean, a lot of the hangars have been hit. A number of the barracks have been hit as well. There's fairly, I don't know the exact number of casualties. We have at least 35 killed, and there's certainly more than that. Um, but by the end of this first wave attack, the base has certainly been seriously degraded in terms of its ability to project any sort of air power.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's not the only one.
Yep.
Kaneohe and Eva also get hit pretty good, and we'll talk about Wheeler in a minute. But Kaneohe and Eva get strafed, and you
Yeah.
put down Eva at least 8 times.
At least 8 times. I've been out there a couple of times too. There's actually a sort of a grassroots movement to do a little more restoration around that airfield. It is the least known, I would say, of all of the airfields that it's attacked. And there's still a fair amount of the original tarmac and that stuff because it's kind of off in the boonies, down in southwest Oahu. But yeah, it gets strafed 8 times. 9 of the 11 Wildcats that are there are damaged. 18 of 32 Devastators and Vindicators are also damaged, and 6 of 8 other aircraft, along with some of the hangars and other installations. Meanwhile, up on the north side of the island at Kaneohe, it is hit by this package of 11 Zeros that come in and they destroy the fire engine right at the outset, and about half of the PBYs are damaged or destroyed in this initial set of just strafing attacks. And there's worse coming because Zuikaku is going to be hitting it with level bombers here during the second wave attacks. So those airfields are pretty heavily hit. And then that brings us to Wheeler, which is actually in reverse order. Wheeler is the first place on Oahu that is attacked during the course of this attack. And so the strike that's slated here is the Vals from Zuikaku that are led by a guy named Sakamoto Akira. And he is the gentleman who drops the first bomb of the war against the Americans. This goes down just a few minutes before the Val attack against Ford Island. And so he brings in 25 Vals from Zuikaku's group and goes after Wheeler. The first place that he hits is around the apron, which is packed with American aircraft that are practically wingtip to wingtip, again, because of General Short's orders to protect these planes against espionage and that sort of thing. A lot of these planes are P-40s, although there's some P-36s that are in the mix as well, and some other aircraft. Um, But the first place, apparently, though, that really takes it is the engineering department, along with some of the warehouses and machine shops. One of the valves gets lucky and hits the fuel line that supplies the gas station and results in a fairly significant explosion as a result of that.
Yeah. I put that in the notes that it's rather curious that the aircraft were not the initial
Ignored
target.
initially, right?
Yeah,
Not
but it's
ignored, but
for sure. But it's the facilities that are being targeted by the valves right straight off the bat. Do you have any inclination as to why that is?
no, I don't know what the
No.
deal is, and I've been there and actually looked around as well. and that is a weird sort of reversal of Japanese targeting priorities because typically they go after the shiny things that can shoot back at you, which is be
Sure.
the aircraft. But in this case, no, they go after the facilities first.
And I
Couldn't
mean,
tell you.
it's not like we're talking, the strikes are minutes behind one another. I mean, they're quite
Yeah,
literally, seconds or maybe a minute or two behind, and in come the A6Ms.
right.
14 of them, as a matter of fact, from Soryu and Hiryu. And these are the guys that just lay waste to all these fighters that are packed up in the middle of the tarmac right there, and they're just shooting the living hell out of
Yeah,
everything that's going on. Similar to Hickam, and it's important to note too that Hickam was a bomber base and Wheeler was a fighter base.
right.
So they were not there may have been a bomber on Wheeler or a fighter at Hickam, but they were designated as different.
Segregated. Yeah, this is
Correct.
the big pursuit base on the island. That if there is going to be fighter opposition coming up against this attack by the Americans, it's going to come from Wheeler. And so yeah, they this is why they're dedicating more planes to this base than they are using at either Ford Island or Hickam.
No.
Is yeah, they're going after with every dive bomber in the inventory off of Zuikaku.
And
So
as we're going to see, some of the fighter opposition does indeed at one point come from Wheeler Field. So as these attacks are ongoing, as just like everywhere else, guys, some of them are a little bit faster to react, some of them are a little bit slower to react.
yep,
Two of the guys that are a little bit slower to react
yep,
are one Kenneth Taylor and George Welch.
yep.
Why are they slow to react? Be
Actually, before we go, I just wanted to point out one more little arcane stupid thing.
mm,
Um, One of the things I find really interesting about this is the fact that the attack against Wheeler is being executed by dive bombers from Zuikaku, but is being flown top cover with Zeros from Soryu and Hiryu, which again gives you an indication of just how sophisticated the planning was by the Japanese, that they didn't have to operate, you know,
air groups.
Zeros from the same carrier coming along here. No, the Zeros from Zuikaku are actually going out to Kaneohe to hit it. So again, just the sophistication and scale of this attack are just head and shoulders above anything else that anybody could have done. It's really really impressive in that respect. Sorry, now let's get back to the Hollywood moment of Welch and Taylor. So
And it is Hollywood. And it's
it
been in
is
every
so
freaking movie about Pearl Harbor,
absolutely
including the worst movie, which is
the
Pearl
worst.
Harbor. But worst movie ever, by the way.
It
Just,
is it.
oh
I
God,
have
it's
never
terrible.
I've never seen it. How's that? Okay, because I knew that it was going to be terrible. I was just like, I'm just not going to pollute my eyeballs with that. I think the pithiest quote I've heard from that is from Rich Frank. That by the time you get to the actual attack, he says, "Never have I been so anxious for the Japanese to attack." So
As
anyway,
I
yeah,
am often said about that movie, the only
yeah,
two things that are accurate in that movie is there is a place called Pearl Harbor and it was attacked. And that
and it
is
was
it.
yeah.
Terrible film. Anyhow,
Anyhow,
the two idiots that are in that movie are based off of two real
right.
people, and
Real
they are
people.
Kenneth Taylor and George Welch, who by far were nowhere near the representation that they're showed on screen. These guys were genuine bona fide badasses. They
Yeah.
had been among the slower to react because the night before they'd been in an all-night poker game. They'd been drinking, and I do mean drinking, all
As
night
one
long
does. Yes.
as one does in a poker game, and
Right.
they hit the rack at 0-400. So these boys
Right. They hit the rack
not,
after Fuchida and Murata had just
yes,
gotten up. Right. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So Taylor is the first guy to roll out of the sack. He grabs a pair of shorts, like basketball shorts, and he can't get into them. He's like struggling to get into his pants, can't get into his shorts. He grabs the tuxedo pants that he'd worn the night before, manages to get into those, and he runs outside.
Classic.
Welch follows behind, and this is God's honest truth. Welch follows him after that. They stand there and they just kind of stare at the destruction, like,
In their
what the
hungoverness. Probably
or
still drunk.
still, yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
say probably still inebriated, watching all this go down. and they realize that we got to do something. We're fighter pilots. We got to do something. Their aircraft, oddly enough, were not at Wheeler. Their fighters were at Alieva, which is at the other field, well to the north of Wheeler Field. So
On the
it's
West Coast. In fact,
it's a
Fujita and gang had basically flown over it on their
yeah
way in to attack this place. Yeah,
yeah it's
it's a
way away. It's not
it's a
not
fur
close.
piece. Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
not close. So they realize pretty quickly that any fighter that's out there on the tarmac is going to be Swiss cheese, and indeed they are.
Yeah,
They immediately go back, and there's certain instances in your life when you could be three sheets to the wind, or in this case, let's just assume that they're rather hungover. That when something goes down, you are sober. I
this
mean, instantly. It
this
has
was a
happened to me.
remarkably clarifying moment for them. I'm thinking,
Big time.
yeah,
I think their sobriety was almost instantaneous when they walked outside and realized what the hell was going on. So one of them, and I forget who it is, gets on the horn and calls Alieva and says, "Hey, gas up the birds. We're
we're
coming."
common. Yeah,
And they get outside, jump in Taylor's Buick, and as they do so, and this is again, it's Hollywood, but it's true. They're coming out of the barracks and they're running towards Taylor's Buick under machine gun fire. The
nice.
Japanese are strafing the area. They're literally the bullets kicking up around them, and they're zigzagging as they're going into the car. They get in the car, they haul ass, and they go. There are several pilots behind them on their way to the same field, but Taylor and Welch are the first ones to get out, and they go. They arrive at Aliyev at about 8:30. So, I mean, that'll tell you about how far it was. And I mean, these guys aren't doing the speed limit. They're flying. They're
Right.
quite literally, they're moving.
It
Um,
takes them, in yeah, a better part of half an hour to get up
yeah.
there. It's a bit. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a haul.
It's a fair little drive. When they get there and they get in the airplanes, oddly enough, they receive orders to go patrol Barber's Point. And both of them are like, what?
What? No, we're
Th-
going to go where the
they're
enemy
here.
planes are and shoot at them. Yeah,
Yeah,
right,
but they follow
right.
orders. They get up, they go do, and they go over by Barber's Point, and oddly enough, they don't see a damn thing. So they start heading back towards inland Oahu. They go past Eva Mooring Mast, which, of course, as we know, is under strafing attack and under attack at that moment. They see Japanese aircraft, and they immediately go into the attack. Welch leads Taylor down in the attack, and the pair immediately latch onto the last aircraft in line, as most fighter pilots are wont to do. They hit a pair of valves, both from Hiryu. Um, they both naturally claimed kills, although Welch's did not go down. Taylor's did go down. The valve shot up by Taylor. It smacks right into the beach right there, right into the surf, right there at the water's edge. He bores in on another airplane that is led by, go ahead.
That's that plane that we were seeing on the footage that we were doing the other week. Remember, there
Could
was that
be.
plane that was right down on the water's edge, and
Hmm.
the tail did kind of look like a Val tail. It was not a zero tail.
Could
And
be.
so maybe that was it. Okay, sorry. Just had
Very
a
well. No, that very well could be.
yes.
These aircraft that are in this formation are led by Abe Zenji, whom I knew you met Zenji Abe, didn't you?
I did. I met him once at the
Yeah,
very tail end of his life at the
yeah.
65th symposium out in Hawaii, and yeah, just met him, just shook his hand. I mean, that's all I did. Didn't get a chance to know him, but he was a very interesting guy and wrote a really good book
He
and
did.
a very smart fellow.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
dive bomber
As
pilot, really good bomber pilot too. Yeah,
good dude too. His
yeah,
daughter was quite nice. She spoke English for he did not, but
yeah.
or at
He
least he
did
did
not.
not to me. Yeah. So anyway, as they're coming in, they're attacking these aircraft. One of the rear seaters in Abe's formation, it's not Zenji's plane, but one of the aircraft returns fire and hits Welch's P-40, takes several pretty significant hits, including one that goes right through the cockpit and causes something to catch fire. And the
Hmm.
airplane starts to smoke, and Welch says, "Nope." And he pulls out and he gets out of there and he pulls away. Um, all of this is going down, and they're starting to run out of fuel. They're starting to run out of ammunition. They head back to Wheeler Field because that's their home base. They head back to Wheeler Field for fuel and ammunition. And this is, again, you couldn't make this up if you tried. They're sitting there on the apron, still in the cockpits of the airplanes, and they're fueling the airplanes up and they're throwing ammo into the trays and the wings and the whole thing. And by the way, these P-40s are armed, I believe, with 30 calibers. I don't believe they had 50s in these
Okay.
P-40s. Um, As soon as their rearming is somewhat complete, they move off. Welsh is the first one to lift off. As he's going down the
I'm surprised it didn't get shot at when they were coming in on the landing pattern, to be quite honest with you. But
well, they damn near get shot down as they're trying to take off
okay,
because
yeah, right,
as they're coming down the tarmac to take off, Welsh specifically, he's flying into the face of Japanese aircraft that are coming down the tarmac. He's got nowhere to go. It's either I sit here and get
right.
shot at, or I get up and at least I can do something. So he pours the coal onto this bird, and he literally takes off right through the Japanese formation that's heading straight for him. He's climbing at full power. He outran a Val. So as soon as he came in there, a Val latched onto him to try and shoot him down, but a Val ain't going to chase down a P-40. It's not going to
Yeah,
happen.
he's
He gets
lucky it
away.
wasn't a zero because a zero absolutely will outclimb you.
Hell yeah.
So yeah,
Absolutely. Taylor still had his armor on the wing loading ammunition. And he said, nope. Boom, slammed the throttle forward. The dude rolled off the wing, actually cracked his head and got a concussion. So it's not that funny. But
yeah,
Taylor, same thing. Takes off directly in the face of the oncoming Japanese. His airplane actually struggles for altitude. He did not have apparently a full power climb like Welsh did. Um, he pulls into a chandelle when he gets off the air. He shot at and missed what he thought was the last Japanese Val in a string of Vals that were coming. It wasn't. Almost immediately, he starts to take fire from behind and he gets hit in the arm, like a round passes through, I think his wrist or something like that.
hmm
And it bloodies him pretty good.
yeah,
Um, Welsh pulls around now. He's already made his pass. He's gotten away, outran the Valley. He comes back around, sees Taylor is in trouble. Welsh comes back there. He dives in his defense, dropping flaps so he doesn't overshoot the Japanese Val because he's got full power.
right.
He pours fire into the Val and actually shoots him down. That Val goes
hmm
down. Taylor then gives chase to another Val with one working machine gun and sends that Val down in flames as well. And these are all confirmed because apparently the Japanese confirmed, yeah, we didn't, these guys never came home.
Yeah,
Um, Taylor then landed and tried to get some more ammunition. Another officer walks up to the cockpit, sees that he's wounded because he's bleeding all over the damn place, and says, "You know, you need to get out of this airplane and get out. You're hit." He refuses to leave the airplane, despite being wounded. Sits in there while he receives a full load of ammunition this time. Takes off again and goes after him again. He finds another valve,
this has got
shoots.
to be we're into the second wave by
Oh yeah,
this. Yeah,
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 yeah.
for sure.
That's even though this episode is the first wave,
Yeah,
this is one of the classic moments of the attack, and it does actually span into both the first
absolutely
and the
it
second
does.
wave.
Yeah, because the Japanese only lose one vowel in the first wave. So anyway,
He, despite being shot up in the arm, he climbs up and gets another valve at this point. Taylor lands at Alieva later on that afternoon. His day is over with. Welsh goes to pursue another valve and shoots it down theoretically. That I could not find absolute claim on at all,
yeah,
but it's claimed that he shot it down 5 miles out to sea. He also finishes for the day, lands at Alieva and wraps it up. But
right.
the whole Hollywood-esque image of these two fighter pilots getting up there and just kicking ass is 100% true. They really did kick ass, and the stories of them actually of what they did as compared to what's been shown in movies and told about is actually more impressive. Another pilot that took off in the second wave, excuse me, fighter pilot that took off to fight did not find anything. He took
Hmm.
off in a P-36, was none other than Francis Gabby Gabreski.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Gabreski
Yeah,
was, yeah, he was at Wheeler. He took off in a
I did not know
P-36.
that.
Hmm.
Always learning.
Yeah.
Okay.
Didn't find anything, but
Yeah,
by God, he tried. And yeah, Gabby Gabreski saw his first combat action of World War II
in
over
the
Pearl Harbor.
Pacific.
Hmm.
And of course, he's going to go on to be a great ace.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
One of the best, one of the finest.
yeah.
So we've talked a lot, a lot, a lot, but for a
A lot today.
big surprise.
Yeah, right.
But for all intents and purposes, the first wave is done.
Yep.
And it absolutely wrecks Oahu.
Yeah,
Let's get
it
into the
is.
specifics here.
Yeah, the first wave is by far the most destructive of the two attack waves, and the best executed of them as well. Um, so by the end of this, the U.S. Pacific Fleet has taken a really massive blow. Arizona has been demolished. Oklahoma has capsized with very heavy casualties. West Virginia and California are either sunk outright or are in the process of sinking. Nevada, as we'll talk about in the next episode, is in the process of getting herself underway, but she's also collected enough damage at this point that she is slowly sinking as well, because it's really going to be the torpedo that she collects at the during this first wave attack that is going to do her in. Utah is sunk, of course. Oglala is sunk. Raleigh and Helena have been damaged. The airfields around the island have been smashed, and the number of American aircraft, I don't know that you can disaggregate them between the first and the second attack waves, because of course Kaneohe is going to get lined up here for a very heavy attack by Zuikaku here in the second wave. But by the end of the Pearl Harbor attack, I mean, American air power on this island has essentially been
Yeah.
exterminated. So yeah, this is a real haymaker this first wave has doled out. And we'll have some diagrams here of the total aggregate hits from both the torpedoes and the high level bombing attacks, showing which ships took what. But you can see that the devastation on Battleship Row is tremendous at this point, particularly of course in the outboard battleships. um, Japanese losses have been trivial. So the Japanese lose, as I said, 5 Kates were the price that they paid for demolishing Battleship Row. They lose 1 Val and they lose 3 Zeros shot down, one of those being up at Kaneohe. A total of 17 further Vals, 11 Zeros, and 18 Kates. That's 46 more aircraft were at least damaged to some extent, which means that out of a total of 183 aircraft, roughly a quarter or so have been damaged or destroyed. So that is not a trivial cost. I mean, we tend to look at Pearl Harbor as this kind of walkover that the Japanese paid hardly anything in terms of losses. That's not true. There were a number of injured Japanese crewmen, but the first wave has gotten away relatively scot-free, relatively light casualties, I guess I would say, in terms of aircraft destroyed.
Yeah. And as we know, when the second wave's coming in, the entire island is on full alert. So
Yeah,
the difference, as we said it all episode long, the Americans weren't just standing there picking their nose. They immediately sprang into action and returned fire. That fire is going to grow in significance and
yeah,
intensity, I guess I should say, with the second wave as it's coming in, because now they've really kicked the hornet's nest and everybody's up.
yep, exactly. I don't know that we can come up with an accurate tabulation of the American casualties at this point, but clearly the lion's share has already been suffered in the first wave attack between Arizona and Oklahoma. That's where, by far the heaviest body counts in this entire affray are. So, if I had to do napkin math, I would guess that the Japanese have probably killed 80 to 90% of the Americans that they are going to kill in the course of this attack. And probably that happened within the first 10 minutes or so, I would judge,
I would agree.
between, yeah, the demolition of Arizona and the capsizing of Oklahoma.
Yeah, you got 400 and what, 429 guys that are
So,
on
yeah,
Oklahoma
on
that are
Oklahoma.
killed, and 1177 on Arizona. And a lot of these guys die. I'd say a lot. There's several dozen pass away after
Yes,
the effect, but for easier math, you're looking at close to 1,600 American sailors and Marines that are killed
out of 2000.
in
So,
this first
yeah,
wave. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, it is
in this first
roughly
wave.
80%
Yeah,
thereabouts.
yeah,
So a devastating attack and a
absolutely.
real testament to the professionalism of the Japanese Navy and the very high quality of their naval aviators. This is other than, yeah, Fuchida made some screw ups, but just given the sophistication and scale of this attack and the quality of Japan's aviators, they weren't going to do much better than this, even if Fuchida hadn't fumbled the flares.
Yeah.
So,
And it ain't over. It
and
ain't
it
over.
over.
All right, we will wrap up the Pearl Harbor attack next week with the second wave. We'll carry on with the story of Mervyn Binion and Doris Miller because those
Yeah,
people we talked about for sure. John Finn too, by the way, who was at Kaneohe, who his Medal of Honor action,
yeah,
kind of like Welch and Taylor, it kind of overlaps in the first and second wave, but there's only so many guys you can talk about. We've already talked long enough.
yes.
So, are you are you good? You
I'm
good?
good.
All right,
Great.
let's wrap this
Wow.
bad boy. So, with that, we want to thank you very much for listening in on this conversation. Please give us a rating and review. We do appreciate it. If you have a comment, send it to unauthorized specific podcast at gmail.com. Actually, I had somebody say they couldn't find our email. I'm like, do you not listen to the show? See, I
I
told you people don't listen all the way to the end.
and I'd just like to apologize too. I'm probably 400 or 500 Facebook friend requests at this point
Yeah.
behind. I'm buried. I
You,
don't know that I'll ever get to them, to be quite honest. So,
you
I,
know, and that's I'm glad you said that. And I've been meaning to say this and I forgot about this many, many times because it's not top of mind. I get like you, I get a lot of Facebook friend requests from people I don't know.
yeah,
And I don't use Facebook that. I use it for the show more than anything else. And I use Facebook as personally as for like pictures of my dog,
yeah,
which he's a beautiful animal, but I mean it's, I'm not going to friend you on Facebook unless I actually know you because there's pictures of my wife and my children on there, which
yeah,
that's, if you know me and we've hung out and drank beer, then fine. But if you haven't, please don't take offense. It's nothing personal. I don't know you. So anyway.
yeah.
Anyhow, uh,
Anyhow,
if uh, if you have a question or a comment, but no questions, just comment, send it to the email. You already know that. I already spit it out. So with that, I just want to say thank you very much. Once again, my name is Seth Paridon. John, my good friend, thanks for being here. And let's get out.
sounds good. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us, and we will see you again next week.